Chapter 141. The spirit talismans transformed into lightning, instantly lighting up the dark hall. However, it couldn't hide the two red dots that suddenly lit up. Holy Hall, the blazing white lightning lashed fiercely against the iron-like skin, but didn't leave a mark. Qian Yannian took a step back. Looking at the tower-like monster in front of him, he revealed a panicked expression. Demon, demon! Although he didn't sense a trace of demonic aura, the enormous, almost tangible pressure still pressed down on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. His mind was a mess. How could the seemingly ordinary and weak second-layer qi refinement youth have such a transformation? It was completely beyond his imagination. Li Qingshan unfurled his body. The sharp horns on his head almost touched the ceiling. He lowered his head and looked at Qian Yannian. He said in a booming voice, "I told you to stop. Why won't you listen?" Qian Yannian roared. The two gung metal qi swords turned into two rays of golden light and stabbed at Li Qingshan. It was difficult for his huge body to dodge such an attack, and Li Qingshan had no intention of dodging at all. Before the gung metal qi swords could touch Li Qingshan's skin, they crashed into the turtle shell-like shield and were countered by the demonic qi. They turned into powder and couldn't reform again. Qian Yannian instinctively touched his 100 treasures pouch. There were life-saving talismans and spirit medicines that could be used to turn the tables. The 100 treasures pouch was a qi refinement cultivator's second life. An iron pillar-like index finger shot out a claw that was as sharp as a machete. With a sharp clang, it stopped in front of Qian Yannian's forehead. Qian Yannian froze, not daring to move an inch. The speed was so fast that he couldn't react. If Li Qingshan wanted to kill him, the sharp claw would have pierced through his head and taken his life. Qian Yannian trembled. "What do you want? I can give you anything. Don't kill me." Li Qingshan hooked the 100 treasures pouch from Qian Yannian's hand and held it between his fingers. Then he picked up the toy-like wind-entwining blade. A complicated expression of flattery, fawning, and fear appeared on Qian Yannian's face. Then it collapsed like a mask. Without any hesitation, Li Qingshan pierced Qian Yannian's chest with his saber. For a fifth-layer qi practitioner, this wasn't a fatal wound, but it was enough to make him lose most of his battle prowess, especially for a 100-year-old man. Qian Yannian widened his eyes and opened his mouth, wanting to say something. Li Qingshan flicked his index finger, breaking Qian Yannian's jaw like a siege crossbow. Then Li Qingshan unsheathed his wind-entwining saber and took a few steps back. His figure gradually shrunk and finally returned to human form. He said to Qian Yannian, "Now let's continue. Pay attention. I'm going to kill my way over." After losing his 100 treasures pouch, 2 gung metal qi swords, and being stabbed in the chest, Qian Yannian was like a heavily injured beast that had its claws and teeth plucked out. He let out meaningless roars. As if he knew it was impossible to escape, Qian Yannian forcibly sealed his wound with true qi, stirred up all the true qi in his body, and pounced at Li Qingshan. Qian Yannian didn't know who he was, but a gust of wind hit him in the face. A layer of pale golden luster appeared on Qian Yannian's body. Li Qingshan slashed down with all his strength, but Qian Yannian didn't dodge. His hands formed pale golden qi blades and stabbed at Li Qingshan's ribs. Clang! The wind-entwining saber, which contained Li Qingshan's true qi and great strength, broke through Qian Yannian's gung metal true qi and left a bloody mark on his shoulder. Li Qingshan also turned a blind eye to it. The wind-entwining saber slashed at Qian Yannian's neck. He basically turned a deaf ear to it, now that he saw it with his own eyes. Even though he had personally killed many people in the past and originally thought he had grown accustomed to blood and death, he still felt greatly shocked. Just who was it? What had they done? The moon emerged from the dark clouds. The moonlight coated everything with a layer of silver frost. The surroundings were deathly silent. There was not a single sound, as if the creatures of the natural world were all stunned, afraid to disturb them. However, the person who had caused all of this, Qian Rongji, currently wielded a water-splitting barb, sending the lucky survivors who were still moaning and breathing from the pile of corpses into hell one by one. Qian Ronghui retreated with a struggle. "No, Rongji, there's no grievance between us." He was the first person to be sucked into the frenzy of blood. However, with his strength at the peak of the first layer of Qi practitioner, he still managed to survive. However, his true Qi had already been completely depleted, and he was covered in wounds. He basically had no strength left at all. However, Qian Rongji said, "For years ago, on the 15th day of the 8th month, you called me a whore." The water-splitting barb stabbed into Qian Ronghui's head mercilessly. Qian Yannian chased her out of the hall. When he saw this, he immediately froze up. His mind recovered a sliver of clarity. Was the Qian family finished just like this? Qian Rongji turned around and looked at Qian Yannian. There was no fear on her face. Instead, she said with great delight, "Ha, grandfather, do you see this? Your children and grandchildren are all dead." With a wild howl, Qian Yannian sank into an even deeper madness. He ignored Li Qingshan and lunged towards Qian Rongji. Li Qingshan gripped the chipped, wind-entwining blade firmly, but he did not swing it. This woman was vicious and capricious. She had done him harm time and time again, so how could he save her? Watching Qian Yannian lunge over, Qian Rongji fished out 3 fire talismans, which turned into fireballs and shot towards Qian Yannian. Boom, boom, boom. There were 3 explosions. Flames surged into the air, and the shock waves swept up the remains of the corpses. However, before Qian Rongji could even celebrate, she saw Qian Yannian forcefully charge through the flames. His sparse hair had all been singed, and his body was covered in charred marks. However, he still charged towards her without any regard for the consequences. A sliver of fear finally appeared on Qian Rongji's face, but she did not flee. She gripped the water-splitting barb firmly and stabbed it towards Qian Yannian with an azure streak of light. Suddenly, a verdant vine sprouted from the ground, wrapping around Qian Yannian like a snake. Gung-metal true Qi erupted from his body and tore through the vine, but he was stopped for a moment. The azure streak of light pierced his chest. Blood gushed out from the wound from Li Qingshan's attack, unable to stop it anymore. Qian Yannian took a few more steps forward, and even more vines sprouted from beneath his feet, wrapping around him. He was like a moth trapped in a spider's web, struggling more and more powerless. Before anyone knew it, Jiao Fei had returned. He held a seal in his right hand before his chest as he stared at Qian Yannian with all his attention. The vines were a technique he had used. Only now did Li Qingshan realize that Jiao Fei did not practice the innate method of condensing qi. This was probably the cultivation method of the Green Vine Mountain. Qian Rongji did not seem to expect her attack to be effective either. She rejoiced madly, but she did not rush up to finish him off. Instead, she took a dozen or so steps back, cautiously. "Grandfather, your wives, concubines, and children are all here. You see them? They're right next to your feet. Oops, you've kicked your beloved concubine's head. But it's fine." Chapter 142. In this world of blood and darkness, the lush green vines were exceptionally bright. They were full of vitality as they grew and formed a large cocoon. Sacred Hall for a long time, only the rustling of the green vines could be heard. At some point, Qian Rongji had stopped talking, and was staring blankly at the large green cocoon. After confirming that Qian Yannian was dead, Jiao Fei impatiently walked up and dispersed the green vines. He started searching Qian Yannian's body, but of course there was no 100 treasures pouch. He couldn't help but turn around to look at the stubborn 16-year-old youth. He was currently standing in a sea of bloody corpses, looking up at the night sky with great concentration. The moonlight enveloped his body, as if all of this blood had nothing to do with him. The stars in the summer night were bright and dazzling. Even the moonlight couldn't diminish their beauty. Li Qingshan discovered that compared to the corpses on the ground, the starry sky was still much more beautiful. He wasn't pretending to think about life. He just suddenly felt a sense of regret. As for what exactly this feeling was, he didn't know. He couldn't help but think of that dream again, the stars sinking into the sea of blood. After thinking about life, Li Qingshan lowered his head. "How many did you catch?" "3. 2 escaped." "Not bad." "You praise me too much." After a few words, Jiao Fei obviously wouldn't ask where Qian Yannian's 100 treasures pouch was or ask Li Qingshan to give him a share. He also had his own plans, which were to chase down a few second-layer Qi practitioners who posed no threat, and then sneak back to see how things developed. If Li Qingshan was defeated, he would quietly leave and report to Zhuozhibua to ensure that he wasn't in any danger. But he never would have thought that Li Qingshan would really be able to drag Qian Yannian to this point. Jiao Fei knew very well that his entanglement of green vines couldn't possibly catch a 5th-layer Qi practitioner. Qian Yannian was clearly at the end of his rope, and this was all thanks to Li Qingshan. Sacred Hall, although he seemed to be in an extremely difficult and horrible shape, Li Qingshan had truly worn down a 5th-layer Qi practitioner. It was better to maintain some respect for the strong. As for the Qi practitioners at the foot of the mountain, even though they were quite far away, they had many ways to see the top of the mountain. At this moment, their faces were filled with disbelief. From the beginning until the end, they had not seen any hidden masters of the Hawkwolf Guard. It was actually just this young man alone. As a 2nd-layer Qi practitioner, he had been able to fight against Qian Yannian for so long. In the end, he actually won out of the blue. Could it be that Qian Yannian's body had deteriorated to such an extent that he was taken advantage of? That was probably the only explanation. Gong Liangbai murmured, "How is this possible?" This was also what the other Qi practitioners were thinking. The water-splitting thorn fell to the ground with a clang, and the faint sound of sobbing could be heard. The moment Qian Rongji saw Qian Yannian's body, her entire body trembled. The smile on her face had completely disappeared. She was stunned for a moment, and a warm liquid slid down her face. It wasn't blood, but tears. She had no idea why she was crying. All she did was suddenly bawl. Li Qingshan and Jiao Fei glanced at one another. They said nothing. Li Qingshan sucked in a deep breath and said loudly, "Today, Li Qingshan, Jiao Fei, and Qian Rongji of the Hawkwolf Guard have executed Qian Yannian in accordance with the law." After a pause, he continued, "And they have annihilated the entire Qian family to serve as a warning to the rest. You Qi practitioners are blessed by the heavens, so you should take this as a warning." They understood the principle of self-preservation and were unwilling to offend a Qi practitioner family for the sake of ordinary people. The Qi practitioners hid in the dark and left the ancient Wind City. They all remembered a name. Li Qingshan said, "Are you done crying?" Qian Rongji raised her head in a daze. Li Qingshan said, "If you're done crying, then let's go. Our mission is over." Moreover, he had already obtained what he wanted. After saying this, he ignored Jiao Fei and Qian Rongji. He only glanced at the treetops in the distance before striding down the mountain. Qian Rongji said, "Wait." Li Qingshan turned around in confusion, only to see Qian Rongji smiling and wiping away her tears. She said, "I haven't taken anything yet." Then she started rummaging through the pile of corpses, muttering, "You guys left a weak girl like me here. I'll be scared." Li Qingshan was dumbfounded. He had thought that she would be able to relieve the pressure in her heart after getting her revenge. Not only would she lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha, but she would also be able to gain some understanding of life and become less narrow-minded and vicious. However, the truth was exactly the opposite. Getting her revenge had indeed released some things from her heart. However, what was released was not the beautiful feelings that the world expected or the suppressed innocence and kindness. She finally didn't have to pretend to be the Qian clan's first miss anymore. Laughing amidst the pile of corpses, she seemed to have fused that aura of insanity into her bones, becoming more and more twisted. Only now did he realize that everything about being enlightened and forsaking evil for good was all made up in stories. The true state of the world was that it was easy to change mountains and rivers, but it was hard to change one's nature. There were Buddhas and demons in the world, or perhaps this was also the state of the world. Qian Rongji slightly curled her dress. "Thank you for your help today. Only then could I get my revenge. If you don't mind, I'm willing to repay you with my body." Her face was full of smiles, and she seemed to be in a good mood. Li Qingshan's footsteps did not stop. Jiao Fei walked even faster, as if avoiding snakes and scorpions, leaving Qian Rongji's silly laughter behind him. Qian Rongji paced around the pile of corpses like a pitch-black ghost. She was no longer searching for something. Instead, she was like an artist admiring her favorite work. A tourist strolled through a beautiful garden. She stopped from time to time, holding a familiar face, and saying a few words to it. Even if she didn't get a reply, she would still chuckle for a long time. Compared to this purgatory of corpses, she seemed to be even more strange and terrifying. Little and got the hint from Li Qingshan, but he did not leave immediately. Instead, he hid at the side and entered a state of intense thinking. The eminent monk was blessed with both fortune and wisdom. He saw that the world was like a fire, and the house was like a sea of bitterness, and the people were drowning in it. Greed, anger, stupidity, and could not extricate themselves. Even if he cultivated Mahayana Buddhism, he still couldn't save all living beings. He mourned for their misfortune and was angry for their inaction. Mourning gave birth to boundless compassion, and anger gave birth to boundless killing intent. During the great calamity of heaven and earth, at the juncture of life and death, he found that his heart was still hindered. Once again, he saw his heart and understood his nature. Thus, he followed his heart and made the 4 great vows, so that his thoughts would not be hindered and he would be able to survive the calamity. Such as the heavenly demon, his nature was extremely evil. Once he understood his nature, he slaughtered and became free, equal to Buddha. Oh, I understand. That eminent monk was a super genius. He saw that all living beings were stupid and stupid. No matter what he said, they wouldn't listen. And no matter what he said, they wouldn't understand. His heart was traumatized, and he was suppressed by the 4 words, "My Buddha is merciful." He could only keep it in his heart and couldn't release it, so the pressure was as great as a mountain. It is easier to kill him with a single blow than to bring him, oh no, a horrid mass of idiots to the other side. It is like having a swarm of flies around him all day, and he grabs the fly, squeezes its belly open, pulls out its intestines, and puts the intestines around its neck and gives it a good yank. Ha! His whole tongue was sticking out. He raised his hand and slashed down. Whoosh! The whole world was peaceful. In a small inn at the foot of the mountain, Little and wrote down his understanding on a piece of paper and told it to Li Qingshan. After thinking about it, Li Qingshan said so. Little and was dumbfounded. He felt that after Li Qingshan said this, the eminent monk's realm had dropped by more than one level. Originally, even if he fell into the path of evil, he was still a white-bone bodhisattva with great wisdom and power. Now, he felt that the pain and troubles this bodhisattva had experienced were no different from those of a commoner. Li Qingshan said, "Hey, little, and let me tell you, the most important thing to be a person is to be happy. It's the same as being a skeleton. You can't go to extremes. Those who go to extremes are all mentally ill. When you meet someone who can be reasoned with, you talk to him. When you meet someone who can't be reasoned with, you stab him." Chapter 143. Li Qingshan continued. All right, if you want to be a good person, you have to stretch your right cheek after being slapped on the left. If you can't take it anymore, you become a bad person, killing everyone on sight and disregarding your own family. If the Holy Church can't save the common people, you go and destroy them. If that's not a mental illness, what is it? You should comprehend and cultivate this ability when you should, but don't take it too seriously. As a result, a certain great figure above the 9 heavens was demoted to the level of a mental illness. If Oxen were here, he would definitely clap his hands in praise. It was not that Li Qingshan's words were impressive, or that he displayed a great source of wisdom. On the contrary, his words were rather brainless, but contemplating the philosophy of life and the great Tao of the world had never been his forte. He was not a wise person. He did not have great wisdom or wisdom. He was not a benevolent person. He did not have great compassion or compassion. He was a brave person. He had a domineering and fearless spirit. If he could not understand, then he would not think about it. He would do whatever he wanted to do. These words sounded simple, but even great cultivators, thousands of times more powerful than Li Qingshan, could only carefully comprehend the essence of the ability created by immortals and Buddhas above the 9 heavens. It was impossible for them to be like Li Qingshan and say, "Don't take it too seriously." Humans could not be without respect, but the brave were fearless. No matter what you said, the ability and cultivation method were just tools in my hands. They existed for the sake of satisfying my thoughts. I must not allow any ideology to take over my thoughts. Little and naturally regarded Li Qingshan's earnest teachings as the best. He valued them much more than the essence of the path of white bone and great beauty. Although he felt that there was something off with Li Qingshan's words, it was definitely not Li Qingshan's fault. Perhaps he had not thought it through, or perhaps there was something wrong with that great monk. However, it freed him from his chaotic and profound thoughts, preventing him from being too deeply affected by the ability. Probably no one could have imagined that a half-baked teacher would have such a miraculous effect on an idiotic student. Li Qingshan felt rather proud of himself. No matter how talented and clever he was, little and was still a child, he still needed his guidance like a beacon. The Holy Church, as he said that, Li Qingshan's stomach growled again. He always got hungry easily after a great battle. He went out to eat before closing the door. Li Qingshan held back his excitement and took out Qian Yanyan's 100 treasures pouch. Let's see how we've benefited from this trip now. As soon as he channeled true qi into it, Qian Yanyan's 100 treasures pouch, he could not help but gasp in amazement. The pouch was the size. Qian Qian, he could not. As for Zhao Liangqing's 100 treasures pouch, Li Qingshan was afraid of the imprint of the gate, so he did not dare to carry it on him. However, this was fine. He could replace the one from the Hawkwolf Guard. At Ian 1000, Li Qiu, the first thing Li Qingshan wanted to collect were pills. Qian Rongji had not lied about one thing. He took out small bottles and placed them on the table. Before long, they filled the table. The Qian family's alchemy skills did not seem particularly impressive. Every single qi gathering pill was the size of a longan at the very least, and each bottle could only hold 3. But even with that being the case, there were over 400 of them. The book was Qian Yanyan's greatest weapon for controlling the Qian family, yet it had all fallen into Li Qingshan's hands now. These pills were enough for him to reach the next level on the path of demons and demons. Clearly, Qian Yanyan was not skilled in forging artifacts, nor was it possible for him to go around killing qi practitioners like the Hawkwolf Guard. Among the 2 low-grade spiritual artifacts, one of them was a patterned, hidden sword over a foot in length. However, after channeling true qi into it, it shone with a light 5 feet long, turning into an extremely long sword. Li Qingshan immediately gave it to Little Anne. The other spiritual artifact was rather special. It was a round, wooden shield the size of a wash basin. When he tried channeling true qi into it, the round shield suddenly became the size of a millstone and much heavier. Li Qingshan had already known that some spiritual artifacts could change shape, such as the metal ruler in Wang Pushi's hands. However, this was the first time he had obtained a spiritual artifact like that, and it was a defensive one at that. However, this spiritual artifact suited him extremely well. With it, he could wield the huge shield and charge around. If he encountered an enemy, he could just slam down with the shield. Who could stop him? Apart from that, there were some worldly items. The first item was actual gold and silver. 1,500,000 taels of silver notes was slightly less than he had imagined. Qian Yanyan had occupied ancient Wind City for all these years, but his savings were actually not as great as Zhao Liangqing's. It made sense when he thought about it. The Qian family was large, so they had many people to support. Most of the money was probably in the hands of the caretakers below them. However, it was not just the silver notes that were money. There were also a large number of property deeds and land deeds. With a casual glance, the Qian family occupied most of the property in ancient Wind City, as well as several thousand acres of fertile land outside the city. According to the law, everything a Hawkwolf Guard obtained from carrying out a mission belonged to them. As a result, Li Qingshan had become a landlord overnight. When he thought about the days he spent in the cowshed back then, he could not help but sigh. Originally, Li Qingshan wanted to look for the cultivation method that allowed him to emit sword qi from his nostrils like what Qian Yanyan practiced, but he did not find it. However, he did not find it to be a pity. He would earn contribution once he returned anyway, so he could visit the library of the Hawkwolf Guard. And he did not plan on changing cultivation methods before he reached the 9th layer with the innate method of practicing qi. He was in no hurry to find a new cultivation method either. The sounds of celebration outside the window had yet to stop. Gongs and drums filled the air as firecrackers crackled. It actually seemed like it would last for the entire night. Li Qingshan smiled. He ingested another qi gathering pill and began cultivating. Shaoan also sat cross-legged beside him like an old monk. The next morning, a bitter but smiling district magistrate knocked on Li Qingshan's door. When he saw Li Qingshan, he was surprised. He never thought that the great Sir Hawkwolf Guard, who had destroyed the Qian family and shocked ancient Wind City, would actually be so young. He almost doubted whether he had found the wrong person. Li Qingshan said, "Sir, what business do you have with me?" The district magistrate was extremely familiar with the voice that rang through the night sky last night. He was certain that it was the person before him, so he told him the reason for his visit. Li Qingshan had no idea how to react. The district magistrate wanted to parade him through the streets in red, saying that the sedan chair was already prepared downstairs. Of course, he turned him down. The district magistrate did not dare to dissuade him. Who would be bold enough to force someone as vicious as him to do so? Li Qingshan said, compared to this, you should hurry up and get people to dispose of the corpses on the mountain. The weather is scorching right now, so we can't let a plague spread. The district magistrate said, You're right, sir. I've already sent people to deal with it. Near the Qian estate, there's a pit at the foot of the western mountain. I've gathered the commoners to move the corpses there for burial, but the commoners find it filthy, and it's the corpses of people from the Qian family, so none of them are willing to help. Li Qingshan sank into thought. There should still be quite a lot of gold and silver utensils left in the Qian estate. Send people to search for them and treat them as wages for the commoners. You have to deal with this matter properly today. You can't make any mistakes. The district magistrate beamed with joy and agreed in a hurry. He thought to himself, This Sir sure is considerate of the people. If Li Qingshan did not say anything, who would be bold enough to touch the items in the Qian estate? Li Qingshan had other plans in mind. After seeing off the district magistrate, he returned to his room and said to Little, And can you really cultivate like this? Little and nodded. Li Qingshan asked, How long will it take? Little and shook his head. Li Qingshan said, All right, we'll stay here for a while. It'll be perfect for us to calm down and cultivate for a while. If we return to Jiaping City, we probably won't be as calm anymore. All right, Li Qingshan. In a small garden in the Hawkwolf Guard's office in Jiaping City, Zhuo Zhibua held a letter. The corner of his eye twitched, and his fury surged. He shattered the stone table with a palm strike. Chapter 144. Li Qingshan had no background at all. As a matter of fact, Wang Puxi did not even like him very much, which was why he just sent him under his command. In the sacred hall, if Gu Yening really cared about this kid, then it was impossible for Wang Puxi to not care about him. It was just like how if Wang Puxi cared about a person, then he, Zhuo Zhibua, would have to serve him carefully. This was the simplest principle, but Zhuo Zhibua had been overly cautious, just in case. What affected him the most was still the kid's attitude. He was just too arrogant, which made him feel like he had a powerful background. When the cruel truth was revealed, all Zhuo Zhibua felt was that he had been viciously toyed with. His face reddened at first before darkening. His fury towards Li Qingshan erupted all at once. Please calm down, Commander Zhuo. Gu Jian persuaded him tactfully. Zhuo Zhibua said frigidly, As a Black Hawk commander, I stand above 1,000,000 people. Who knows how many lives I've taken? Who knows how many years it's been since someone has been bold enough to toy with me like this? Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan, you're impressive. Gu Jian said, Though the kid is in ancient Wind City, he probably won't be able to return. Why must you be angry at a dead person, Commander? Zhuo Zhibua said, I just hate that I can't kill him myself. And that Zhou Wenbin, he's not a good person either. Gu Jian said, He's all alone as the district magistrate. He doesn't even have a single Qi practitioner under his command. So why must you put up with him? Commander, our Hawkwolf Guard is responsible for supervision. Why don't we find some evidence of his crimes and report him as well? Zhuo Zhibua said, Shut up. What evidence does he have that you can search for? He comes from the 100 schools of thought, and he has countless classmates. Even the prefect admires him very much. If I fall out with him, I'll only disappoint Commander Wang. Gu Jian said, Yes, sir. I've misspoken. Zhuo Zhibua said, Let's just wait for the news of the kid dying in the line of duty now. Afterwards, he would immediately set off for ancient Wind City and destroy the Qian family, avenging Li Qingshan and demonstrating the might of the Hawkwolf Guard. That old man, Qian, should have saved up quite a lot over all these years. It was about time for him to use his blade. Takitara, this was Qian Rongji's original evil plan, killing two birds with one stone. She could eliminate the Qian family and Li Qingshan, and she could also get a generous share of the spoils from Zhuo Zhibua. In the evening, Li Qingshan arrived in front of the sinkhole at the foot of the West Mountain that the magistrate had mentioned. That sinkhole wasn't especially big, but it was more than enough to hold 1,000 corpses. A strong, putrid smell came from the sinkhole. Li Qingshan subconsciously held his breath. It had only been a day, but the corpse had already rotted. It was even more unbearable than the thick smell of blood from last night. The gathered workers were moving the corpses over, taking off their clothes and throwing them into the fire. Then, they threw the white corpses into the pit. Everyone frowned and used a wet cloth to wipe their mouths and noses. If the district magistrate had not spent a lot of money and threatened them with a plague, no one would have been willing to come. Not only was the stench unbearable, but it was also very inauspicious. A wisp of black smoke rose from the fire and went straight into the sky. There was not even a trace of wind in the surroundings. The dusky yellow sun that was about to set was still emitting a scorching heat, causing the dirty air to distort slightly. Hundreds of crows cawed and circled in the sky. From time to time, they would fly down and peck the eyeballs of the corpses. All of this was even more inauspicious than last night. And in the world, there was probably nothing more filthy than this. Afterwards, he crouched down and said to Qian Rongji, "If you want to harm me, then you better be fully prepared. You only have one chance. If you fail, I'll stop at nothing to kill you. Of course, you better give up. Otherwise, if I'm in a bad mood one day, I might just kill you to make myself happy." The resentment was gradually replaced by fear. Under those calm words, Qian Rongji felt an indescribable pressure. That feeling of suffocation was even deeper than the feeling of her neck being strangled just now. What good will it do for me to harm you? Qian Rongji avoided Li Qingshan's gaze and said with a stiff expression, "As the saying goes, evil people will be tortured by evil people." When her insidious evil met Li Qingshan's strong and cruel evil, she naturally retreated. Li Qingshan stood up and left the sinkhole, heading for ancient Wind City. Qian Rongji stood up and dusted off the dirt on her body. She straightened her clothes, and a smile returned to her face. She looked at Li Qingshan's back and said to herself, "One chance." Jiao Fei felt a chill in his heart and asked, "Are you going back?" Qian Rongji smiled and said, "It wasn't easy for me to return to my hometown. How can I leave so soon?" Hearing her answer, Jiao Fei actually let out a sigh of relief in his heart. Among the three of them, he was in the third layer of the Qi refinement realm. He was also the oldest and had the most experience in the Jianghu. Even his reputation was much greater. His name, Jiao Fei, Master Jiao, was also very famous in the Jianghu. It was not something the likes of Black Tiger could compare to. He was famous for being crafty, sinister, and difficult to deal with. However, being between the two of them, he felt like he was between a poisonous snake and a ferocious tiger. At every moment, he felt like he could die a violent death. This was not an illusion. Whether it was Qian Rongji's evil plan or Li Qingshan's unyielding methods, Jiao Fei's personal safety was not guaranteed at all. The risk was extremely high. If Qian Rongji asked Qian Yannian to harm Li Qingshan, Jiao Fei would be killed as well. When Li Qingshan faced Qian Yannian, if Qian Yannian directly used his killing move and summoned the gunmetal sword Qi, or even the lightning summoning talisman, it was also very likely that he would be killed. Although Li Qingshan would not sit idly by, he would definitely not expose his identity as a demon for him. It had to be said that Jiao Fei's experience in the Jianghu had not been in vain. His senses were very sharp, and just now, when that ferocious black tiger pressed down the colorful poisonous snake and let out a threatening growl, the innocent Jiao Fei naturally became the poisonous snake's bargaining chip. Then, it made the ferocious tiger ponder whether it should be ruthless for once. Jiao Fei left in a hurry. In the end, he glanced back at Qian Rongji from afar before completely vanishing into the darkness. He had decided that he would never carry out missions with the two of them again. No, he would maintain his distance from them. The colorful, poisonous snake stood before the pit of 1,000 corpses she had personally created, silently brewing new venom. She even felt rather grateful for the black tiger's threat just now. The moment she revealed her venomous fangs would be her death. Even if she succeeded, she would be torn to pieces by the furious tiger. However, she was not overly worried. Patience had always been the best quality of a poisonous snake. She had been able to put up with the Qian family for over a decade, to the point where everyone believed she had already been completely tamed. She did not resent the Qian family at all. She even made Qian Yannian allow her to join the Hawkwolf Guard in Jiaping City. That was because she had reached the second layer 3 years ago, which gave her the ability to leave the Qian family. Chapter 145. However, Qian Yannian felt that there were many strange things about this whole thing. Holy Church Shi had already figured out what kind of person Li Qingshan was. He might be brave and unyielding, but he definitely wasn't lacking in brains. Everyone knew that fighting against a 6th layer Qi practitioner with a 2nd layer was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, but he was fearless. Her purposeful probing just now proved once again that he indeed didn't have a background to rely on. Then what did he rely on? That night on the boat, Qian Rongming went to cause trouble for Li Qingshan. He didn't die at Jiao Fei's hands, but died at Li Qingshan's hands because he used a special method to hide his true strength. Could it be that his true strength wasn't just at the 2nd layer? Qian Rongji's heart skipped a beat. Zhao Liangqing and Furong's inexplicable disappearance might have been a coincidence. However, she knew Qian Yannian's strength very well. Even if he dodged those 2 gunmetal Qi swords, he had many powerful talismans in his 100 treasures pouch. How could they be useless? She closed her eyes and began to recall. After washing away the blood and madness, the scene of that night reappeared in front of her eyes. Qian Yannian glared at her, but he didn't say a word. Why? His jaw was broken. There were many wounds on his body, but the fatal one was on his chest. That was why her water-splitting thorn could easily pierce through it. When Qian Yannian came out, he was on the verge of death. Li Qingshan seemed to be in a sorry state after being sent flying, but he didn't have any decent injuries at all. He defeated Qian Yannian head-on. Li Qingshan must have a very powerful trump card to be so arrogant. Considering the wounds on Qian Yannian's body, Li Qingshan's body tempering technique was very likely much stronger than what he showed. So strong that he could instantly take away Qian Yannian's 100 treasures pouch, break his jaw, pierce through his chest, and then pretend to be sent flying. If that was the case, everything made sense. All of Li Qingshan's words and actions became reasonable. As the saying goes, a thief is a villain, but he is wiser than a gentleman. Li Qingshan didn't expect that his actions would be described in such detail. Qian Rongji saw another scene. A fierce tiger crouched in the dense forest, waiting for a vulture to descend from the sky. Who is the hunter and who is the prey? It's still unknown. Shuo Zhibua, that idiot, claimed the word wisdom in vain. He actually couldn't see the danger hidden within. As expected, he was the same as Qian Yannian. He looked smart and experienced, but in reality, he was rotten and stupid. However, they couldn't be blamed. They had been suppressing everyone with their strength for too long. Naturally, they couldn't be bothered to use their brains. Of course, she wouldn't kindly remind Zhuozhibwa. She would be happy no matter who died. It would be best if they perished together. For the first time, she felt that Li Qingshan had a higher chance of winning. He was in the dark, and the people in the dark were terrifying. She had experienced this firsthand. If she used this matter to threaten Li Qingshan, now, she would definitely die. If she went back and reported this to Zhuozhibwa, there wouldn't be any benefits. Moreover, if she lost the bet, she would have to be buried with Zhuozhibwa. Li Qingshan's warning was not a joke. Then, if she bet on Li Qingshan, would she be able to get a share of Zhuozhibwa's corpse? She seriously considered the various possibilities. Being a cunning villain was indeed much more difficult than being a pedantic gentleman. At this moment, she was absolutely calm and rational. She was even more broad-minded than a gentleman. She completely cast aside her personal honor and disgrace. Everything was for the sake of profit. In the sinkhole, a chilly wind suddenly blew towards Qian Rongji, causing her back to feel cold. Unknowingly, it was already very late at night. She turned her head and saw a ball of dark green willow, the wisp floating above the sinkhole. Even regular people would be alarmed, let alone the culprit behind all of this. However, she only scolded with a smile, "Damned ghost." Afterwards, she temporarily set aside the matter regarding Li Qingshan. There were even more important matters waiting for her. Now, it was time for her to really make a trip home. She raised her head and smiled at the starry sky. "Father, mother, brother, and sister, you must be anxious from waiting." After Qian Rongji left, an astonishing change was taking place under the thick soil in the sinkhole. The porcelain jar cracked like a spider web and shattered with a loud bang. The blood flame of corpse incineration surged like a tide and burned in all directions, devouring all the corpses and filthy flesh and blood, turning them into a part of the blood flame and burning even more fiercely. The dark bottom of the sinkhole turned into a bright sea of fire. The rotten and filthy corpses turned into clear and rising flames. The willow, the wisp on the top of the sinkhole, disappeared. Crash! Thousands of white bones fell to the bottom of the sinkhole. Little and sat cross-legged in the center of the raging blood flame, manipulating it while absorbing its energy. The skulls at the bottom of the sinkhole opened their dark eye sockets and looked at him silently. Little and pointed his finger downwards, and the blood flame split into thousands of flaming snakes and pierced into the skulls. The pitch-black eye sockets also lit up with the same blood flame as his. All of the skeletons were shaking violently and colliding with each other, producing rapid banging sounds. Then, they flew up and pieced their bones back together. Thousands of large and small skeletons jumped at the bottom of the sinkhole and danced wildly in the flames. The sound of bones colliding with each other was like music, and the sound of teeth chattering was like a song of joy. They surrounded Little and in the center, as if they were carrying out a grand memorial service. The blood flame of corpse incineration could split off and reside in other skeletons, resonating with Little and being controlled by his will. He knew this a long time ago. However, this was meaningless. These frail skeletons would probably not even be able to defeat low-level cultivators. A skull flew up and landed in Little Anne's hand. Their eye sockets met, and the blood flame burned together. A hint of paleness gradually appeared within the bright red color of the blood flame of corpse incineration. The light of joy appeared in Little Anne's eye sockets. This was a flame that had advanced to the next level of the path of white bone and great beauty, the pale flames of bone incineration. As its name implied, the flame could melt white bones. If it were a regular flame, It would only be able to char white bones no matter how hot it was. However, under the licking of the pale flames of bone incineration, the skull melted like candy. This process was extremely slow and unbelievably slow. After a long while, the skull just now completely melted, turning into a drop of pale white liquid that dripped into his forehead. Then he raised his hand. A bone arm landed in his hand, and he continued to melt it down. As he refined the white bones, the pale flames of bone incineration grew stronger and stronger. At the same time, it melted little N's body of white bones. This process was 100 times more painful than when he used his blood to cultivate. It was like countless steel needles, saws, and grinds his body. Regular people would go mad from the pain in an instant or even die from it. It would be impossible for them to persevere, but the flames in his eyes burned brightly. There was no fear at all. Every time he felt like he could no longer endure it, a snowstorm would appear before his eyes, and he would return to that windy and snowy night below the ice sword cliff. Li Qingshan swatted him to the side with a wave of his hand, telling him to leave. Then he disappeared into the snowstorm, climbing the ice cliff alone and walking the path of death. He stood alone in the snowstorm for a very long time. He did not hide, as he had been told. Instead, his entire body was stiff and bone-chilling. He thought anxiously, "Am I going to die?" Then he knelt on the ground, his entire body in pain. In the end, he caught up. At the crucial moment, he helped Li Qingshan because he did not know where else he could go. When everything was over, he looked at Li Qingshan and roared at the sky. He could not speak, but he gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. The impact that night had on his soul was no less than Li Qingshan's. Compared to the pain at that time, what was this moment compared to the pain at that time? The raging pale flames of bone incineration enveloped his entire body, melting away the traces of impurities. At the same time, it merged with even more bone fluid, and the cycle continued. Before he could reconstruct his physical body, he wanted to reconstruct his bone body, become stronger, and keep up with his footsteps. Li Qingshan came to the county office and handed a pile of land deeds to the county magistrate for him to auction. The county magistrate was overwhelmed by the favor. "My lord, I'm afraid this cannot be sold in a short period of time." Li Qingshan said, "I know that time is of the essence. Even if the price is discounted, it does not matter. Consider it a benefit for the citizens of ancient Wind City." With a few hundred qi gathering pills in hand, he did not care too much about the silver. He had thought of burning it all, but that would definitely cause a huge commotion in ancient Wind City. That was why he had resorted to this method. The county magistrate said, "My lord, your merit is boundless. On behalf of the citizens of ancient Wind City, I thank you for your kindness." Merit? Li Qingshan smiled. He did not believe in this. Settle this within a month. Even without a warning, he did not believe that the county magistrate would dare to cheat him. At most, it would be a small profit, and that was natural. The county magistrate said, "My lord, is there anything else?" Li Qingshan turned and walked out the door. "I will stay in the city for a while. Just don't bother me." As the largest landlord in the city, Li Qingshan obviously would not stay in an inn. He chose a small manor halfway up the mountain. It was not far from the Qian Manor, and the surroundings were very quiet. Most importantly, he could see the pit from here. He stood in the courtyard. There were grape trellises in the courtyard, and there was a rocking chair under the grape trellises. There was also a large fire tank to the side. There were a few carps in the tank, swimming freely. A crescent moon rippled on the dark water surface. Although Little did not say it, he could vaguely sense that the path of white bone and great beauty was an extremely impressive ability. It did not require spiritual pills or spiritual herbs, and the cultivation speed was extremely fast. Its power was astonishing as well. However, everything was equal. One needed to possess talent beyond the reach of normal people, and one needed to endure pain that normal people could not. Although little and was only a child, he was a very smart and strong child. There was no need for him to worry too much. The only thing he was worried about was the future, their future. After so many years, little N's family was probably long gone. Perhaps they'll just go back to reminisce about a few graves, and then I'll adopt him. Li Qingshan scratched his head. Ha! It really is a demonic thought, a demonic thought. In the end, he decided not to think too much about it. He just sat on the ground and tossed a chi-gathering pill into his mouth, crushing it. A heavy bitterness spread, but his mind was clear. He then began to cultivate. A ray of sunlight fell on his eyelids. His eyelashes fluttered a few times, and he opened his eyes. Afterwards, he found a music store and spent 35 taels of silver to buy 2 music scores and a jade flute. When he returned home, he laid down on the rattan chair under the grape trellis and casually flipped open a book, reading it carefully. The sun had already risen high into the sky, turning from red to white. Through the dense grape leaves, the scattered sunlight landed on the yellowed pages of the book, as well as his face. Only now did he seem like a teenager, rather than a fearless cultivator or a decisive black wolf guard. The edges on his face that seemed to be carved from stone seemed to have dulled slightly, while his gaze that had always been as sharp as a sword had returned to its sheath, becoming deep and clear. The spirit turtle's demon core revolved slowly in his body with unprecedented clarity and agility. Water vapor surged overnaturally, soaking his clothes. His mind was submerged in a great battle in the history books, so he failed to notice it. The sacred church, it was a state of mind, a form of cultivation. He had to unstring the bow when it was not in use. He relaxed himself from his tense state and nurtured his body and mind, all for the sake of shooting an even more powerful arrow in the future, or perhaps very soon. Not everyone had such leisure. There was a small town several dozen kilometers away from ancient wine city called Shangguan Town, as most of the people there bore the surname of Shangguan. Although there were a few surnames, it was not some clan of martial arts. The people there were only the most ordinary of people. There was a clan in the town that went from an ordinary clan to one of the greatest clans in Shangguan Town in a single leap because they had a daughter with the surname Qian. Their walls were painted white, and their servants were plentiful. They sang happily every day, becoming the envy of the entire town. On the official road from ancient Wind City to Shangguan Town, a black-clothed knight was riding a white horse as he slowly moved forward. Qian Rongji gazed at Shangguan Town on the horizon from afar. Her heart, that had been as still as water, suddenly became a mess. She could not help but tighten her grip on the water-splitting barb on her waist. The icy weapon brought her a sliver of warmth. The sun shone brightly, but her eyes carried a sliver of gloom that she could not shake off. She said in a self-deprecating manner, "Qian Rongji, oh Qian Rongji, you've really overestimated yourself." She had been taken away from that clan. After she achieved some accomplishments in cultivation, Qian Yannian allowed her to return to visit her family. Afterwards, she would return frequently and treat everyone in the clan extremely gently. She wanted Qian Yannian to believe that she was nostalgic and valued relationships. She wanted the Qian family to believe that these people were enough to control her. But now she had broken free from her restraints, so there was no longer any reason for these illusions to exist. Her heart gradually grew cold. It was time for her to end things. No one deserved happiness from her misfortune. No one. Shangguan Manor. The vermilion door was wide open. Blood flowed out from behind the screen wall. Behind the screen wall, Qian Rongji held the water-splitting barb in her hand. She frowned and pondered. Around her lay a dozen or so corpses. There were guards, servants, maids, and old maidservants she could call out each and every one of their names. But now they were all dead. She continued to walk into the manor. She saw more and more corpses. When she arrived at the inner courtyard, she saw the corpse of a noble woman lying dead on the ground. She used to be a village woman. Now, she wore expensive beads on her head. She wore the precious silk that she had brought from the south. However, it was already badly mutilated by the blood. She could barely remember this noble woman's name. She had called her mother for too long. Yet she felt an indescribable sense of loss in her heart. She took a deep look at the corpse and stepped over it. Then she saw more familiar people, including her brothers and sisters. Even though it was noon, the ancestral hall was still very dark. In the heavy darkness, there were many memorial tablets enshrining the ancestors of the Shangguan family. A gray-haired, green-faced old man held a plump, middle-aged man hostage. He stared at Qian Rongji coldly and hatefully as she walked in. He called out, "Shangguan Rongji, I knew you'd return." Qian Rongji said with mixed emotions, "Third uncle." The old man was Qian Yanyan's nephew. He had practiced martial arts for many years, finally breaking through to the innate realm and reaching the second layer of Qi practitioner. He became one of the masters of the Qian family. That night, he had fled from the main hall of the Qian family. Jiao Fei did not choose to chase after him, which was why he managed to escape with his life. Qian Rongji said, "Did you do all of this?" Her third uncle said, "That's right. Shangguan Rongji, you traitor. How dare you mention the word money? You've caused the deaths of everyone in the Qian family. You've destroyed the Qian family. You've destroyed everything I had. I will slaughter your entire family. Rongji, save me." The plump, middle-aged man shuddered. Tears and snot flowed from his nose. Who knew whether he was afraid or sad? It was the person she called father. Qian Rongji said furiously and frantically, "Father, I will definitely save you. Qian Haoda, release my father." Qian Haoda said, "Do you know fear now? You bitch. Throw down your weapons and kneel." As soon as Qian Rongji hesitated, he crushed the man's shoulder. The man shrieked out and ordered, "Why don't you kneel?" With a clang, Qian Rongji tossed down the water-splitting barb and knelt down. She made her way forward as she knelt. She said sorrowfully, "Please release my father." Qian Haoda smiled madly and complacently. He was reluctant to kill her in a single stroke. Not only did he want to destroy her entire family, but he even wanted to torture the person closest to him before her. Qian Rongji took another step forward and reached backwards with her right hand. True Qi swept up the water-splitting barb and returned it to her hand. She leapt up and stabbed at Qian Haoda as hard as she could. Qian Haoda pulled the plump man in front of him and used him as a meat shield, blocking him firmly. Then he grabbed the man's other shoulder. Once he forced back Qian Rongji, he would torture him viciously. He would definitely make this bitch regret everything she had done. However, he suddenly felt a chill in his chest. Qian Rongji had no intentions of stopping. The water-splitting barb stabbed deeply into the meat shield, and the tip entered Qian Haoda's chest. True Qi turned into blue light and passed through his body. Yudash, Qian Haoda, and the plump man both stared at Qian Rongji in disbelief. All they saw was that the sorrow on her face had already vanished completely. She had become cold and complacent. Qian Rongji smiled. "Originally, it would have been rather difficult to kill you." Qian Haoda said, "Shangguan Rongji, why, you vicious woman, you won't even spare your own family." Qian Rongji corrected herself. "I'm not Shangguan Rongji. I'm Qian Rongji. Basically, all my family is dead. You're the only one left. From today onwards, I have no family at all." Suddenly, she drew the water-splitting barb. Qian Haoda and the plump man collapsed on the ground at the same time. Qian Rongji did not even glance at the plump man. She removed 100 treasures pouch from Qian Haoda and said sweetly, "Thank you, third uncle." She was just like the obedient girl from before. Qian Haoda raised his hand with difficulty and gathered true qi. The water-splitting barb pierced through the man's head without any hesitation. "There's no need to be so polite with qi. Rongji, save me." The plump man extended his hand with difficulty and grabbed the hem of Qian Rongji's clothes. "Don't be noisy," Li Qingshan said. "I'll give you a bigger pool in a few days." The water jar immediately became quiet. A few days ago, he had crushed a qi concentration pill of poor quality and sprinkled it into the tank. The next day, the carp had grown a full circle, and on the third day, it had grown another full circle. Today, the water tank was so narrow that it could not accommodate the carps swimming around. Li Qingshan stood on top of the water jar and looked at the huge red carp. "Why don't I just do you?" The carp sank to the bottom of the jar. "It's a pity that my culinary skills are average." Li Qingshan smiled and grabbed at the water jar. The demon core rotated, and the water in the jar surged out. It kept changing shape in the air, and the carp swam in the middle. Li Qingshan brought the carp and walked towards the Qian house. There was a big pool in the Qian house that could accommodate the carp. Climbing over the walls and doors, the huge Qian house was empty. It had turned from bustling to desolate, and there was always something strange about it. It had only been 10 days since anyone had taken care of it. Weeds had grown on the small paths, and Daughter had climbed up the pillars. There was a sense of decadence amidst the vitality. On the stone steps, the dried bloodstains that could not be wiped clean exuded an ominous feeling. After so many days, no one in the entire ancient Wind City dared to go near this place. They only dared to look at it from afar and sigh. Although this house was auctioned by the district magistrate, Li Qingshan knew that no one would buy it. It would not be long before it was completely abandoned and become a haunted house. In the lotus pond, the lotus flowers had long withered, but the leaves were still dense. "No one will come here to eat you." Splash! Li Qingshan threw the carp into the lotus pond. The carp raised its head and bobbed up and down, as if it was thanking him. Then it opened its mouth. "Good. Consider it your good fortune." Li Qingshan smiled and placed a qi-gathering pill in its mouth. Only then did it turn around and swim into the depths of the lotus pond. Li Qingshan was about to turn around and go back when he suddenly saw a flame in the distance. It shone through the shadows of the trees. He walked through the forest and walked towards the flame. From afar, he could smell a thick medicinal fragrance. He pushed the door open and saw a 3-legged cauldron in the room. It was spitting out white steam, and there was a thick medicinal fragrance in the steam. A slim figure sat on a praying mat in front of the cauldron. She stretched out her hands and sent waves of true qi into the cauldron. The steam was sometimes more and sometimes less, controlled by the true qi. Li Qingshan recognized her at first glance. "Qian Rongji, what are you doing here?" Qian Rongji didn't answer. After a while, she retracted her hands just now and slowly played with the true qi. The lid of the cauldron opened with a bang, and steam filled the room. Li Qingshan was extremely familiar with this smell. "You're refining pills." He looked around and realized that this should be the Qian family's alchemy room. It was also the source of the 400 chi gathering pills in his 100 treasures pouch. He had eaten many chi gathering pills, but this was the first time he saw someone refine pills. He looked at the cauldron again. Although it was covered in green copper rust, it still shone with spiritual light. It was actually a low-grade spirit artifact. Li Qingshan originally thought that all the decent items of the Qian family would be put into the 100 treasures pouch. He didn't expect that there was another world here. This cauldron was so big that Qian Yannian would have to empty his 100 treasures pouch to barely fit it. The runes and spells attached to low-grade spirit artifacts were limited. This cauldron could spit out water, so of course it couldn't be big or small. Qian Rongji said with a smile, "This is my home." Li Qingshan said, "It's mine now. I've already bought it. According to the agreement, everything in the Qian family is mine, including this cauldron. I've really profited this time." Qian Rongji smiled as she took out the deed to the house and the land. "Count yourself lucky." Li Qingshan turned around and left. He didn't feel that it was a pity. If it wasn't for Qian Rongji, he wouldn't have bothered to search this Qian family mansion. Qian Rongji said, "Do you want to learn alchemy?" Li Qingshan stood still and turned around, saying, "What do you want?" Li Qingshan already understood that on the path of cultivation, other than the most basic qi refinement cultivation, there were also a few side occupations, such as talisman crafting, alchemy, artifact crafting, formations, and so on. Cultivators would usually master one or two of them, which was greatly beneficial to the path of cultivation. From the things in Qian Yannian's 100 treasures pouch, Qian Yannian didn't have much knowledge in artifact crafting and formations. However, he had some knowledge in talisman crafting and alchemy. This was also what he was interested in. "I want you." Qian Rongji hesitated for a moment. Biting her lips, she looked at Li Qingshan with extreme seriousness and shyness, saying, "You must think that I'm a lewd woman, but I've never done anything to a man." She felt that she had more or less figured out Li Qingshan's personality, so she secretly came up with a plan. Although it was a bit unexpected to bump into him today, it was a good chance to try it out. Li Qingshan would most likely reject her. Then she would make a sad expression and tell him about her tragic childhood. At the crucial moment, she would shed a few tears. She didn't believe that his heart wouldn't soften. They would become a naked couple and make a solemn vow of undying love. With his forthrightness and generosity, she would definitely be able to swindle something out of him. However, just as she was seriously setting up her plot and writing the script, Li Qingshan once again acted freely without holding back. He smiled and interrupted her, saying, "All right, teach me alchemy, and I'll reluctantly sell you out." Although he didn't care about such a person, there was no reason for him to refuse such a good thing. He was a man, so why would he be afraid of her taking advantage of him? Qian Rongji's expression stiffened. Although she had thought of many possibilities, she never thought that Li Qingshan would be so shameless. It was completely different from what she had imagined, so she couldn't continue with the act. She suddenly remembered that the first time she met him, he was drinking wine in a restaurant. It was a huge mistake. The vine wanted to wrap around the tree to absorb the tree's sap and obtain more sunlight. It would be best if it could also wrap around the tree to death, but who would have thought that it would wrap around a metal pillar? Chapter 148. Qian Rongji found Li Qingshan to be far too strange. He did not seem like a young man at all. And the more she understood him, the more she found his way of thinking to be different from ordinary people. After a moment of thought, she explained with a smile, "Speaking of methods of practicing qi that can reach the 10th layer, there are 5 most famous ones." "Which 5? Li Qingshan gathered his attention when he heard something so important. Although Qian Rongji came from a small clan, according to the documents, She had once joined a large sect to cultivate, so she was knowledgeable. Qian Rongji said, "Do you know that every single person possesses the 5 elements? The 5 organs of the heart, liver, spleen, lung, and kidneys?" Qian Rongji said, "It's not as simple as the 5 organs. The study of the 5 elements is extremely profound. I can't explain it all in a moment, but every single person can choose one to practice. By focusing on one, their speed of practicing qi will increase drastically. There are many cultivation methods for practicing true qi of the 5 elements. The 5 most famous are the gung metal method of sharpening qi, the yi wood method of living qi, the gui water method of condensing qi, the bing fire method of burning qi, and the 5th earth method of unyielding qi. Apart from a few special sects, such as the sect of clouds and rain, there were also the truly large sections. Many sects would allow their disciples to choose one of the 5 cultivation methods and practice them. Originally, Li Qingshan had been considering which cultivation method he would choose to practice after completing the innate method of practicing qi, but now he had a vague idea of what to do. He did not believe in those secret methods. Although it was not absolute, he believed that survival of the fittest existed in this world. When a cultivation method became famous, it proved that it had been tested and tested by countless people who knew how many generations of people had modified it, making it universally applicable. And when he practiced it, he could use the experiences of many predecessors as reference. As the saying went, "Only when everyone was good would it truly be good." Li Qingshan asked, "Is it possible to cultivate any kind of jinqi?" Qian Rongji said, "Of course not. Everyone has a preference for different attributes. In the big sects, there are ways to test and choose the most suitable cultivation formula for oneself. However, I've heard that there are some talented geniuses who can cultivate 2 or even 3 types of true qi at the same time. The amount of true qi they have is far greater than cultivators who only cultivate one type of true qi. Moreover, it is easier for them to break through realms." "Why did you suddenly become so kind?" Li Qingshan was surprised that Qian Rongji did not make any requests. "I'm not a bad person to begin with." Qian Rongji smiled. Li Qingshan declined to comment. Qian Rongji said, "If you don't believe me, I can teach you alchemy." Li Qingshan said, "You don't want anything?" Qian Rongji said, "I don't want anything." Li Qingshan said, "That's great." But his face did not show that he was particularly happy. Qian Rongji really began to teach him carefully. There are 3 most basic things in alchemy. The first is the materials, ranging from the most ordinary herbs to the most precious spiritual medicines. There are all sorts of strange and wondrous things, including everything. The second was the pill formula. Every pill had its own concoction method, and there were extremely precise requirements for the ingredients and the time needed to concoct it. The third is the furnace, or the flame. According to the pill formula, refining the materials is the alchemy. Li Qingshan listened attentively. Unknowingly, for hours had passed. Only then did he have a basic understanding of alchemy. This Tao was indeed broad and profound. Even if one spent a lifetime of effort, he might not be able to reach the peak. He could only be considered to have a superficial understanding, not even a beginner. Qian Rongji said, "Regarding alchemy, this is about all I know. If you want to continue to study, you can only find another expert." Li Qingshan nodded slightly. Qian Rongji pointed to the furnace beside her. "Do you want to try? There are still many herbs." Li Qingshan was slightly taken aback. He wondered whether she had gone insane or not. However, after hearing so much about alchemy, his hands just became itchy, so he sat down in front of the cauldron and personally controlled it refining pills under Qian Rongji's guidance. However, because the fire was slightly too intense, he ruined a cauldron of qi-gathering pills. Qian Rongji did not show the slightest sign of pity or blame him. Instead, she encouraged him to continue trying. Li Qingshan did not say anything and continued to try. His qi was extremely pure. Using it was like using a finger. In the process of alchemy, he used it more exquisitely. After another 2 furnaces of pills were wasted, he finally succeeded. He retracted his hands, took a deep breath, and revealed a smile. Qian Rongji also praised him. Li Qingshan saw that the sky was beginning to brighten. Before he knew it, a night had passed. He stood up, took out a few bottles of qi-gathering pills, and placed them on the ground as compensation for the wasted pills and to pay the tuition fee. After watching Li Qingshan leave, Qian Rongji picked up the qi-gathering pills. Just now, Li Qingshan did not feel happy because of her generosity. Right now, Qian Rongji did not look happy either. Information regarding the qi methods of the 5 elements and basic alchemy were actually not exactly secrets, and the qi-gathering pills Li Qingshan had left behind were even more than the qi-gathering pills he had destroyed. And even if she was the one controlling the furnace, she could not say with certainty that she would succeed every time. So it could be said that she had earned quite a bit. If it was an ordinary person, they would probably feel happy, but she felt something cold from it. It was an extremely cold alienation, a lack of gratitude, and a lack of human feelings. At any time, if she dared to plot against him, he would not hesitate to put her on his kill list. He would not tolerate it. Another failed attempt. This was not a man who could be manipulated by favors. Could it be that he really had no weaknesses that could be exploited? Li Qingshan did not think too much about it. He was just happy that he had learned a new skill. The path of cultivation was vast and profound, and there were endless mysteries waiting for him to explore. Learning from others was not a bad thing. In the pit, the flames were still burning. The pale bone illuminating flame had already taken up a small portion of it. Little En's bones had become as smooth as jade. Chapter 149. Little En parted his hands, and hundreds of white bones flew in front of him and gathered into a tight ball. Holy Church, the pale bone, smelting flames, surged up and swallowed the white bone ball. The surface of the white bone ball gradually melted. Little En put his palms together and looked down. However, everything was empty. He had no eyes, no nose, and no heart. He chanted the Buddhist scriptures, but he could not make any sound. In this extremely strange and terrifying scene, he gave off a dignified and righteous aura. There was no evil or ghostly aura at all. The process of melting the bone ball was extremely slow, but under Little An's control, the pale bone smelting flames grew stronger and stronger. Before he knew it, another half a month passed. Ever since he learned the art of alchemy that night, Qian Rongji came to visit him a few more times. However, in the end, she could not get anything out of Li Qingshan, so she hurried back to Jiaping City. She only left behind a sentence saying that she would wait for him in Jiaping City. As for Li Qingshan's peaceful life, it was finally disrupted slightly. Even after the Qian family's rule over ancient Wind City crumbled, it could not turn the city into a happy paradise. This world was not a fairy tale world where everyone lived together happily. When there was no tiger in the mountain, the monkey became king. The martial artists, who had been suppressed by the qi practitioners, started to show themselves. They formed their own cliques and fought for territory. Every day, they had to fight on the streets for the ownership of every brothel. There were also countless martial arts competitions and assassinations in the dark. On this day, Li Qingshan went to a restaurant he frequented and ordered a table full of good food and wine. He had just started eating when a large group of people surged in and chased away all the customers. It seemed that the leaders of the two gangs in the western part of the city had chosen this place to negotiate. A man came to Li Qingshan's table and said impatiently, "Are you done eating? If you are, then scram." Li Qingshan looked at the man, then at the food on the table. He shook his head firmly. "I'm not done." The burly man said, "Brat, don't be tactful and pretend to be tough. These days, I've crushed a lot of bones under my hands." In the face of such a meaningless and unthreatening threat, Li Qingshan couldn't even bring himself to feel angry. He sighed that he had been too lazy recently. The burly man was enraged and attacked without hesitation. He was as simple-minded as he looked. No, his limbs weren't developed either. The brawny man flew out of the shop and crashed into a mud wall. However, when one burly man fell, dozens of burly men stood up and glared at him like tigers watching their prey. They shouted a few equally meaningless words and swarmed over. Then all of them flew out. The remaining people seemed to have been enlightened. They stood there while trembling and watched as Li Qingshan finished his meal. He placed the money on the table and walked out of the shop while mumbling to himself, "What do you mean by a peaceful life? If I don't have power, I won't even be able to eat to my heart's content." At this moment, the leaders of the two gangs walked over from the two ends of the street under the escort of their respective people, in order to express their contempt for their opponent. They both chose to arrive late without prior consultation, but they just happened to block Li Qingshan at the entrance, or more accurately, they were blocked by Li Qingshan at the entrance. Li Qingshan had just walked down the stairs when he looked up and saw that the sky was hazy. Summer was almost over. "Who are you?" Li Qingshan thought. He really is a boss after all. At the very least, he can ask about his opponent's origins and name. Of course, it's very likely that I've overestimated him. The several dozen men groaning on the ground should have played quite the role. "Li Qingshan of the Hawkwolf Guard, you're their boss. You've attacked a Hawkwolf Guard in public, so your crimes cannot be forgiven. Today, I'll execute you on the spot." "Forget it. I haven't been very murderous lately. You're lucky." With Li Qingshan's words and his rising aura, the faces of the two bosses paled. Even if another decade passed, the people of ancient Wind City would never forget this name. Just why did they have to run into this person? When Li Qingshan said, "Execute you on the spot," his knees buckled and he knelt on the ground. He could not even beg for mercy. He closed his eyes and awaited death. However, Li Qingshan's tone and aura suddenly plummeted. He was like a singer who could not reach the high notes and had chosen to give up helplessly. Only when the figure vanished did the two bosses rise to their feet with the support of their subordinates. They looked at one another, both feeling relieved that they had survived a disaster. In the end, the two of them let go of their past grievances because of this experience. They drank and chatted merrily, establishing a new gang together. It went without saying, Li Qingshan returned to his residence and patted his face in the mirror. "I need to buck up, Li Qingshan." Suddenly, he felt like he understood the mentality of a master, like, "Someone like you isn't worth my time." However, he immediately made up his mind and tossed this mentality aside. You're just a low-level chi practitioner. You're nowhere close to the level where you can say something like that. Yep, if anyone provokes me in the future, I'll step on their shit. Li Qingshan looked at the pit again. "Little, and are you still not done?" He had already begun to miss Jiaping City. He missed Zhuozhibua. Only when there was pressure would there be motivation. Compared to these dull days, he would rather be surrounded by powerful enemies and slaughter his way out with everything he had. However, When he returned this time, he should be able to give him a pleasant surprise. Although he was rather lazy, he did not stop cultivating over the past half a month. He swallowed close to 200 chi gathering pills. Not only did his demon chi skyrocket, his cultivation of the second layer of chi practitioner also completely stabilized. Abundant and pure true chi flowed endlessly in his yang heel meridian. He had also touched the edge of the fifth layer of the innate method of practicing chi. In the pit, the huge ball of white bone had already been completely melted, turning into a pure, white, crystalline ball. However, one could vaguely make out that it was an extremely vicious skull. Several hundred skeletons had only been refined into a tiny prayer bead. Xiao and pinched the prayer bead between her fingers. She would need at least 14 skull prayer beads if she wanted to make one. White bone spiritual artifacts were actually so difficult to forge. This was also the reason why Little N had chosen the skull prayer beads as his first spiritual artifact. Every single item recorded in the path of white bone and great beauty possessed immense power. They were not items that he could forge at his current level. However, the skull prayer beads could be forged one by one. There was no need to forge them all at once. He could do it step by step. Little N held the prayer bead in his hand and felt that his mind was connected to it. It was as if this prayer bead was not a spiritual artifact, but a part of his body. The truth was more or less the same. The flames in the pit were extinguished, returning to his skull. Only 2 specks remained. He leapt through the soil, following Li Qingshan's aura and leaving the pit. Having lost the support of that invisible power, the soil above the pit immediately collapsed. The next day, someone discovered that the corpses of the Qian family members had disappeared, becoming a mystery. In the darkness, Li Qingshan smiled as he opened his eyes. "Little N, are you done?" A little skeleton that sparkled like jade stood in front of him. The flames in its eye sockets were a mix of red and white. Li Qingshan rubbed his head. "You really are much prettier." From the perspective of a skeleton. From the perspective of a skeleton, Little N opened his palm and took out a skull prayer bead. Li Qingshan picked up the prayer bead. "What is this?" The prayer bead suddenly left his hand and flew around the room, drawing out a white blur. With a series of sonic booms, it was actually no slower than Zhou Wenbin's flying sword. Li Qingshan was stunned. This is a spiritual artifact, and it was at least a mid-grade spiritual artifact. Little N smiled. He clenched his bony fingers, and the prayer bead in the air suddenly swelled in the wind, turning into a skull that was as large as a bucket. Its teeth chattered as if it was laughing strangely. Its eye sockets shone with the same red and white flames as Little N. When a child obtained something good, he obviously had to show it off to the people closest to him. When Li Qingshan understood the cause and effect of Little N's artifact forging, he could not help but sigh. This path of white bone and great beauty sure was useful. That white bone bodhisattva sure was thoughtful. If he did not have a weapon, he would still be at a disadvantage against an enemy even if his abilities and techniques were powerful. As these white bone spiritual artifacts were closely connected to his body, he could control them as easily as he wished. Their power surpassed that of regular spiritual artifacts. Calling them white bone spiritual artifacts was actually not too accurate. Even a single prayer bead was not at the level of a spiritual artifact. However, as Little N's cultivation was still too low and he did not have enough materials, he could only forge them to this level for now. Although the skull prayer beads were the easiest to forge, they were not the weakest. A string of skull prayer beads had at least 14 beads, and there were still 18 beads, 21 beads, all the way up to 1,080 beads. There were 10 different levels, and they could bind immortals and immortals. They had endless uses. Li Qingshan expressed his admiration once again, before asking about the matter he was most concerned about. Do you have any idea how many more sacrifices are needed to restore your body? Little and lowered his head and calculated with his fingers. Afterwards, he raised his head and extended a finger. The flesh and blood of 1,000 more people were needed. Li Qingshan said, "The task is very difficult, but at least we have something to look forward to. Then let's go on a killing spree." When he extended a finger, it was destined that there would be 1,000 less evil people in the world. That night, Li Qingshan went to the county office and asked the county magistrate for the money he needed to sell his house and land. Although it was an emergency sale, it was still more than 1,000,000 taels of silver. It could be exchanged for 10 qi concentration pills from Zhou Wenbin. Before the next day, Li Qingshan took little and left the city that night. He did not look back at ancient Wind City again, nor did he have any plans to return. Meanwhile, in the lotus pond halfway up the mountain, a red carp swam freely, shaking the green lotus flowers. Fate had formed today, and he did not know if they would meet again. Under the curtain of night, Li Qingshan strode through the air in a straight line. By daybreak, he had arrived at the ferry crossing of the Clear River. He boarded the boat and traveled down the river again, heading straight for Jiaping. In Jiaping City, Zhuo said, "So you're saying that he really defeated Qian Yannian?" Qian Rongji said, "Yes, I also find it inconceivable. Qian Yannian, that old thing, is old and frail. He's really too useless. He probably didn't expect that Li Qingshan was a body cultivator, so he was careless and fell for it. It looks like you'll have to do it yourself." When Qian Rongji left ancient Wind City in order to take the spirit artifact furnace with her, she had hired a large carriage to travel slowly. Now, she had just returned to Jiaping. Chapter 150. Not only did Qian Rongji not warn Zhuo that Li Qingshan might have been hiding his strength, but she even purposefully misled him, as if Li Qingshan's victory was extremely lucky. Even if the Holy Church had no interest in it, she still grew tired of this old bastard. She really hoped that he would die a violent death just like that old bastard Qian Yannian. This kind of silent method was often more terrifying than straightforward plots and schemes. Sure enough, Zhuo followed his usual train of thought and sneered. "It's good that he's alive. It saves me the trouble of making another trip. I can even personally kill him and vent my hatred." "Are you going to kill him once he returns?" Qian Rongji hid her smile in the depths of her pitch-black eyes. She was prepared to watch the show that was about to unfold. Zhuo instead said, "We'll have to think about this at length." Although he was a commander, he was not bold enough to kill a Hawkwolf guard so brazenly. Afterwards, he sneered. "Though, do you think he'll be able to do well under my command? I want to show him whether the headquarters of the Hawkwolf Guard is surnamed Zhuo or Li." Qian Rongji said, "On this mountain, in this Jiaping city, is there anything that doesn't belong to you? Even I'm the same." Zhuo laughed aloud. He would continue to watch over Jiaping City, watching over everything like a hawk forged from steel, until the day he died. When he saw the Clear River turn around the mountain again, Li Qingshan directly leapt off the boat, under the cries of the passengers. He climbed up the cliff face. He returned to his residence first and settled little and down before going to see Zhuo. He was very interested in seeing how this commander's attitude would change now. Li Qingshan clasped his hands. "Greetings from subordinate Li Qingshan, Commander Zhuo." That was what he said, but he stood with his head held high like a javelin. He showed no respect at all. Zhuo stopped pretending to be friendly. He asked coldly, "Why didn't you return immediately after completing the mission?" Li Qingshan said in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. I obviously had matters to attend to. Zhuo Zhibua was even more displeased. A person who was about to die actually dared to be so arrogant. I'll deduct half of your merit points. You may leave. Half of their hard-earned merit points had been casually deducted. That was the equivalent of dozens of qi gathering pills. Who wouldn't be angry? Li Qingshan suppressed his anger and didn't argue. He turned and left. He also couldn't kill a black eagle commander on this mountain. Right now, the tiger harms the man harms the tiger's heart, but because of the same reason, they could not easily make a move, but they were already sharpening their knives. As soon as Li Qingshan stepped out of the door, he bumped into Gu Jian. Gu Jian, on the other hand, had been waiting for a long time. With a face full of ridicule, he said, Li Qingshan, do you really think you're a big shot just because you killed an old man who's about to be buried? You actually dared to speak to the commander like that. Now you're suffering. Li Qingshan said, It is indeed a good dog raised by Zhuo Zhibua. His words were full of energy. Of course, he was not afraid that Zhuo Zhibua, who was in the building, could not hear him. His expression became more and more gloomy. What did you say? Gu Jian, who had been scolded in front of his face, was even more furious. This was not the first time Li Qingshan had humiliated him like this. Back then, it was because he was worried that Li Qingshan had a powerful background, that he had tolerated him. Li Qingshan sneered. You only dare to bark at me here. Gu Jian choked and couldn't speak. He had originally wanted to provoke Li Qingshan. As long as Li Qingshan made the first move, Zhuo Zhibua would have a reason to interfere. But it was true that without Zhuo Zhibua, how would he dare to provoke Li Qingshan? That was a monster who had killed a fifth-layer qi practitioner. Li Qingshan waved his hand. Come with me to the front and explain things clearly. I'll let your plot succeed this time and see if Zhuo Zhibua can save you. How would Gu Jian dare to follow? At that time, even if Zhuo Zhibua's plan succeeded, he would still be a dead man. He put on a brave front and said, You don't be so arrogant. I'll see what happens to you. Li Qingshan did not look at him anymore. He turned around and was about to walk up when the old man guarding the treasure house stopped him. Who said you could go up there? Li Qingshan said, I have merit points. Of course I can go up there. Go. The treasure house is under maintenance right now. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter. Li Qingshan's pupils shrank and his brows furrowed. The old man felt an invisible force pressing down on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. He forced himself to say, What? You still dare to barge in? Li Qingshan slowly raised his right hand, and the old man's throat skipped a beat. His muscles tensed up. His remaining true qi, which had been eroded by time, began to circulate wildly. He could sense that as long as Li Qingshan struck, it would be a terrifying attack that could collapse the mountains. Under the tremendous pressure, he did not even have the confidence to receive the next strike. However, Li Qingshan only patted the old man's shoulder. You're on your own. Afterwards, he turned around and left the treasure house. The old man immediately became covered in cold sweat. He clutched his knees and gasped for air. He was a veteran of the Jianghu for many years, yet he had actually been frightened by a half-grown junior. He felt utterly humiliated. He roared at Li Qingshan's back. You're the one who should be on your own. What happened afterwards was basically the same. There were no spiritual artifacts, no pills. The extremely rare merit points had been reduced to meaningless numbers. Li Qingshan wanted to exchange for a new wind-entwining blade, but he was turned down. Originally, the weapons damaged by the Hawkwolf Guard during missions could be exchanged for free. These people did not refuse to give it to him, only finding various reasons to turn it down. However, apart from beating them up, there was no other way to make them submit. These important places that were in charge of wealth were obviously all under the control of Zhuozhibua's trusted aides. As a matter of fact, he did not even need to say anything. All he needed was a single gesture, and Li Qingshan would be completely immobilized in the Hawkwolf Guard. In the end, Li Qingshan arrived before an extremely ancient building. The 3 words Eagle Hunting Building were written on it. This was where the Hawkwolf Guard handed out missions. This was probably the only place on the mountain that was not under Zhuozhibua's control. It was not that he could not control it, but because he could not obtain spiritual artifacts or pills from here. He could only obtain a pile of troublesome missions, and he needed Zhuozhibua's permission to exchange the merit from completing the missions for actual items. Li Qingshan smiled. As long as this place was open to him, it was fine. To him right now, whether it be spiritual artifacts or pills, none of them were the items he needed the most. What he needed the most right now was in the Eagle Hunting Building. A few Black Wolf guards were currently handing in missions in the main hall. As soon as they saw Li Qingshan enter, they immediately fell silent. Their mouths opened and closed silently as they communicated with true qi, discussing quietly. Li Qingshan walked up to the platform, and the attendant behind it stood up in a hurry. He said politely, "Sir, you've only just returned, yet you're already going out to hunt?" There were no secrets on a small mountain like this. However, although he had heard about the conflict between Li Qingshan and Zhuozhibua, he dared not show any disrespect to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan said, "Let me see what missions there are." The attendant immediately took out a thick book, nimbly. "Please have a look, sir." Book of Life and Death. The book was completely black, as if it had been soaked in countless layers of grease, yet it also seemed like the color of coagulated blood. It gave off an ominous feeling with a single glance, but it gave off a faint glow. Holding it in his hand, it just happened to give off a warm feeling. Li Qingshan said, "This book has probably been around for a long time." The attendant explained obediently, "It's been around since the establishment of the guards in Jiaping City. It's probably over 1,000 years old." Li Qingshan said, "Then it really is quite old. Does this book have a name?" The attendant said, "This is only a low-grade spiritual artifact used to record missions. It doesn't have an official name either. However, the people of the Jianghu call this book the Blacklist." Although he was only an attendant, as the guardian of the Blacklist, he obviously showed pride on his face. Li Qingshan said, "Blacklist? Why is it called that? Is there anything particular about it?" The attendant said, "That's because all names that make it onto the Blacklist are certain to die." Li Qingshan smiled. "Birth, old age, sickness, and death are unavoidable. If you don't make it onto this book, you'll definitely die." According to his understanding, the White Lotus Mother who had sacrificed 200,000 people should have made it onto the Blacklist as well. She even required a mighty White Hawk commander, a Golden Core cultivator, to personally take action. However, she did not seem to have been apprehended by Gu Yenying. At the end of the day, strength still reigned supreme in this world. Nothing was inevitable. However, to a group of people of the Jianghu, the names written down by Qi practitioners could basically be regarded as a true death list. Afterwards, he thought about it. What he was about to do was rather similar to the White Lotus Mother, except he stood on the side of the law. He was an enforcer, and he was licensed to kill. Although the attendant was displeased with Li Qingshan's joke about the blacklist, he did not dare to argue with him. He guided Li Qingshan on how to use it. Afterwards, Li Qingshan understood why it was called the blacklist. Flipping through the pages, he saw a string of names. There were normal names, as well as strange Taoist or Dharma names. The way it was used was rather similar to a mental map. With a single thought, the list would be arranged according to different standards. These standards included the amount of contribution, the level of danger, the strength of the enemy, and even the estimated benefits, and so on. By focusing his mind on a certain name, he would receive a complete set of extremely detailed information, including the cultivation method the enemy practiced, the spiritual artifact they used, the area they were active in, Li Qingshan's side inside. It really was a large organization that had existed for several millennia after all. It was well organized and well equipped. The information basically simplified the steps of investigation and interrogation, handing over all the work that regular people could do for them to ordinary people. Afterwards, they would confirm the crimes and compile a list. The Hawkwolf Guard would be responsible for killing them one by one. Every single Qi practitioner was an expert who stood above all. They viewed longevity as their greatest goal, and they treated cultivation and practicing Qi as their number one priority. It was impossible for any Qi practitioner to spend too much time and effort on these miscellaneous tasks. They would be ordered around like miscellaneous soldiers. Otherwise, no matter how great the welfare of the Hawkwolf Guard was, it was impossible for it to be so attractive to Qi practitioners. Sir, once you've chosen your mission, there will be a document that you can refer to at any time. The information on there is already the most detailed information our informants can obtain, but it cannot guarantee that it's completely accurate. I hope you can adapt to the situation, sir. The attendant reminded him routinely. Of course, Li Qingshan answered. With a thought, the blacklist was arranged according to strength. He glanced at the name at the very top, Zombie Taoist, 6th Layer Qi Practitioner. He made it onto the list due to capturing living people on a large scale and refining them into zombies. He's assessed as extremely dangerous. The contribution from completing the mission was actually as great as 5,000. However, it was very clear that apart from Zhuo Zhibua and the Black Wolf commander, who had never shown himself, no one else could complete this. Of course, Li Qingshan possessed the strength to do so as well. However, he only paused for a moment before directly flipping to the back, arriving at the last few pages. Most of the last few pages of the blacklist no longer recorded the names of people, but the names of gangs and sections. In places like the Black Wind Stronghold, a single name was no longer enough for the Hawkwolf Guard to target them. Afterwards, Li Qingshan chose his mission. The attendant said in surprise, "Sir, do you really want to accept these missions?" Li Qingshan nodded without any hesitation. "Go retrieve the documents. I'll set off right now." The attendant passed down the order in a hurry. Before long, other attendants returned with a pile of documents. Many of them seemed extremely old and gave off a dusty smell. Clearly, they had just been cleaned. Li Qingshan stowed all of the documents into his 100 treasures pouch before turning around and leaving. "You'll be able to smile like other children." Li Qingshan did not leave the city directly. Instead, he paid a visit to the government office first. He wanted to exchange the several million taels of silver on him for some Qi gathering pills. He had a feeling that this journey would take quite some time. His opponents would not carry 100 treasures pouches on them to provide him with pills for cultivation. He also came to a better understanding of why no Hawkwolf Guard was willing to squash these bugs. Zhou Wenbin's eyes lit up when he saw Li Qingshan. "You've already reached the second layer. You've progressed much faster than I imagined." Li Qingshan said, "Thank you for your concern, sir. With a powerful enemy right beside me, I obviously can't afford to be careless." Zhou Wenbin said, "As long as you know, I heard you killed Qian Yanian in a one-on-one duel." Li Qingshan said, "It was just luck." Zhou Wenbin said, "Even if it was luck, defeating a 5th-layer Qi practitioner as a 2nd-layer Qi practitioner is still an unbelievable accomplishment. I need to remind you again that the 6th layer is completely different from the 5th layer. Li Qingshan nodded. Afterwards, he thought about Xiao En's various abilities. According to the standards of Qi practitioners, he was at least at the 6th layer or above. Moreover, he was as fast as lightning and possessed tremendous strength. Even when low-grade spiritual artifacts landed on him, they would not be able to leave a scratch on him. He was much more powerful than regular 6th-layer Qi practitioners. If he actually faced an opponent, there was no need for him to use the skull prayer beads at all. It was a battle between Qi practitioners or whatever. All he needed to do was charge up and forcefully tear through their protective true Qi, gouge out their hearts, and he would be victorious. The path of white bone and great beauty was a powerful ability that completely surpassed this world. The higher one cultivated it, the more terrifying its power would be, Zhou Wenbin said. Although the sect has expelled Zhao Liangqing, they've sent people to investigate. They've probably already targeted you. The people of sects probably have no qualms about what they do, so you need to be careful. Li Qingshan said, "Thank you for your warning, sir. I will be careful." The sect had lost their property in Jiaping City, and they had also lost an expert who was about to break through to the 6th layer of Qi practitioner. So this kind of reaction was expected. Zhou Wenbin said, "Fighting for a moment of loyalty is useless. Why don't you listen to me and go to the 100 schools of thought to cultivate for a while and avoid him for a while? When you're fully fledged, why would you need to fear a mere Shuozhibua? As long as you had silver on hand, you could gamble here and try your luck. Whether it was the mine owners who had struck it rich overnight or the miners who were in a precarious situation, they would all come here to try their luck. Under the resplendent lantern light, curses, laughter, and furious roars rang out. The smell of sweat, smoke, cosmetics, and many other smells were mixed together. Everyone's gazes were fixed on the gambling table. They clenched their fists and widened their eyes. Their expressions changed and twisted with the number on the sieve, showing joy, anger, sorrow, or joy. However, the expressions of the gamblers would inevitably end with sorrow and anger. Only Shi Jixiang could remain happy. He was the boss of the auspicious casino. He held 2 large golden balls in his hands, spinning them endlessly. His chubby face was like the Maitreya Buddha, always full of smiles. Looking down from the 2nd floor of the casino, his eyes were filled with compassion. What a bunch of idiots! 2 burly men dragged a man up like they were grabbing a chicken. "Boss, we've caught him." The man knelt on the ground, tears streaming down his face. "Boss Sure, Hero Sure, Grandpa Sure, I beg you, I'll give you my mind, my family business, all of it. I beg you to be merciful and let my family go." "If I let you go, who will let me go? Then, please give me a few more days. I'll definitely raise the money." Shi Jixiang said, "It's only right that you pay your debts. Even your wife and daughter are working hard in the brothel. You're a man. How can you be idling around? Go to the mines and work hard." You actually, Shi Jixiang sighed helplessly. "You're dead, but the debt doesn't. You ran away without a trace. What can I do?" "Shi Jixiang, you bastard, you cheated, you lied to me. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost." The man suddenly lost control of his emotions. He owed a high-interest loan that he would never be able to turn over in this life. He could only die in the pitch-black mines. But before he could finish, he was knocked out by the burly man beside him. Shi Jixiang was furious at the burly man. "Who told you to hit him so hard? What if you kill him? Are you going to work for me?" TSK, TSK. "Look, What a pitiful person. I can't sleep when I see such a pitiful person. Don't let me see him again." The burly man nodded and carried the man out. Only then did a smile return to Shi Jixiang's face. He loved to gamble and was good at it. With his gambling skills, he had ruined the families of several mine owners. Now, he was the biggest mine owner in Silver Mountain Town. He also had a way to deal with those mine owners who didn't like to gamble. Not only was he good at gambling, but he also had first-rate martial arts. He spent money like dirt and gathered a group of good men who could fight and resist. With these two things, he would become the only mine owner in Silver Mountain Town and continue to laugh. This should be the place. At the entrance of the auspicious casino, a youth held a piece of paper and looked at the board above seriously. After confirming the words, "Auspicious Casino," he walked in with large strides. The two guards sized him up and welcomed him with smiles. They didn't stop him at all. After the youth walked in, they smiled and conversed with each other. "His physique isn't bad. He can dig down there for 2 more years." Li Qingshan liked to eat and drink to his heart's content. He had also had 1 or 2 unsuccessful experiences of drinking with prostitutes, so he could barely be considered as a prostitute. However, this was his first time gambling. Everything was novel to him. He looked around and arrived before a gambling table. It was an extremely simple game of buying big or small. He casually threw down a banknote worth 1,000 taels of silver and bet on big. This shocked the gamblers. However, they had seen bigger bets before. They just thought that he was an arrogant young master from a wealthy family. "Once you've made your bet, open." As expected, he opened big. Li Qingshan accepted the banknote with a smile and bet it all on big. After a while, the clamor gradually died down. The gamblers' mouths were wide open. They looked at the small mountain of banknotes and silver ingots in front of Li Qingshan with complicated expressions. He had won 16 rounds in a row. The dealer had changed twice, but it didn't stop his winning momentum at all. He bet everything on every round. In the beginning, there were gamblers who followed him and made some money. But now, no one had the guts to follow him. A manservant came to Li Qingshan's side. "Brother, our boss invites you upstairs for a chat." Li Qingshan glanced upstairs and said loudly, "If you want to talk, then come down and talk." "What, are you afraid of people winning when you run a casino?" He slammed the table and left behind a faint handprint on the heavy marble gambling table. Shi Jixiang finally couldn't laugh anymore. He gave the order in a low voice to clear the place and gather people. This time, a tough guy came. He was at least a second-rate expert. Looking at his posture, he was here to cause trouble. He couldn't be dismissed with money. Li Qingshan lowered his head. The corner of his mouth slightly curled. It was best to clear the place. And, of course, the more people, the better. If you can gather 1,000 people, I will burn incense on your grave. If you have a grave. Chapter 152. A moment later, there were no longer any gamblers around Li Qingshan. Instead, there were dozens of menacing men with swords and sabers, either sneering or staring at Li Qingshan viciously. Holy hell, all the doors and windows were tightly shut, ensuring that not even a fly could escape. Shi Jixiang then slowly walked down the stairs with a calm demeanor, as if everything was under his control. "Brother, who are you? Why don't you reveal your identity? Who knows, we might be friends. If you're short on travel expenses, feel free to ask. I, Shi Jixiang, am not a stingy person." Li Qingshan looked around and said regretfully, "Is that all?" Although he had the intention to eliminate evil, he obviously couldn't carry out another raid in Silver Mountain Town after killing Shi Jixiang. He didn't have the time or energy to do so. There were still 26 missions and more than 900 people. But when it came to something as big as challenging the arena, those who should come should come. Although Shi Jixiang didn't understand Li Qingshan's intentions, he could feel that Li Qingshan had no intention of paying attention to him. With an angry expression, he took off his thin shirt, revealing a muscular upper body with a Buddha tattoo. He sat in front of Li Qingshan. "I'll bet with you this round." Li Qingshan saw him take off his clothes and was about to make a move. Hearing him say this, he was slightly startled, then said, "All right." Whoosh. Shi Jixiang shook the sieve fiercely, his beady eyes staring at Li Qingshan. Meeting those clear black and white, calm eyes, he felt inexplicably uneasy. But he had fought and killed for many years, so his mental fortitude wasn't bad. He forcefully suppressed this uneasiness and slammed the color cup on the table, suddenly shouting, "Is it big or small?" Li Qingshan casually pushed, still betting all the silver on the table, and still betting big. Holy Shi Jixiang raised his eyebrows and injected a wave of inner force into it. Then he immediately opened the color cup and laughed maniacally. 1, 2, 4 points small. "You lost." At the same time, he circulated all the energy in his body. The surrounding men all stared at him fiercely, ready to attack at any moment. They were all wary of Li Qingshan getting angry out of humiliation and attacking them. Li Qingshan shrugged. And then Shi Jixiang was stunned. He had thought that Li Qingshan would angrily accuse him of cheating. "What do you mean?" "I'm willing to admit defeat." "Well, I lost. These silvers are all yours." After Li Qingshan finished speaking, he kicked the marble gambling table. None of the people present had expected that the heavy and sturdy marble table would actually instantly possess such a terrifying speed and momentum as it whizzed through the air. Shi Jixiang's pupils shrank. He was shocked. Even an external martial arts master could not possibly have such strength. At the same time, he reacted and leaped upwards with all his might. His lightness skill that he was proud of, the 8 steps chasing cicada, seemed so slow at this moment. He could only watch as the dice and the color cup spun and flew into the air. The marble table crashed into him. Boom! Smoke and dust flew everywhere. The marble gambling table crashed Shi Jixiang into the wall, embedding the lower half of Shi Jixiang's body into the wall. The bones in the lower half of his body were instantly crushed. The surrounding men, who were watching from the side, did not seem to be able to react to what had happened. Didn't they win? How was it that in the blink of an eye, their high and mighty boss Shi had turned into such a miserable state? Li Qingshan ignored them and made his way over to the marble table. Shi Jixiang really was a first-rate master after all. His life force was tough. Even though his lower half had been crushed, he still retained a clear mind. W, who are you?" Li Qingshan said. "I work for the Hawkwolf Guard." "I find it annoying when people like you smile. Only an expression like this suits you." He casually caught the falling dice beside him. "Also, size doesn't depend on this." He tossed it backwards without even looking at it. The dice pierced a man who was about to launch a sneak attack from behind. "Why are you betting against me?" Everyone immediately understood the difference in strength, as well as the arrival of death. They charged towards the entrance without any regard, wanting to open the entrance that they had just sealed up tightly. A man looked back in fright. From Li Qingshan's waist, flames swept over like a dragon. Wherever it passed by, everyone was reduced to nothingness. Only a set of clothes remained, drifting gently to the ground. This was basically even more terrifying than any bloody scene. He leaned against the entrance firmly before losing all consciousness. The fire snake opened its mouth, about to swallow Shi Jixiang, but then it stopped and looked at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan waved his hand. expressing that there was nothing else he wanted to say. Shi Jixiang opened his mouth. He did have something else he wanted to say, but his face was illuminated by the flames. The fire snake immediately swallowed Shi Jixiang. The gamblers did not disperse. Instead, they lingered outside. The night had only just begun. They had yet to enjoy themselves to their heart's content. They believed that the foreign kid, who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, would soon suffer, and then the casino would reopen. However, there were also people who believed that the kid would not be that easy to deal with. Afterwards, they split into two groups and gambled. However, they waited for a very long time, but the entrance did not open. However, no one was bold enough to barge in. Only when the next morning did people from the government open the entrance. The large casino was empty. In a small inn in the middle of nowhere, there was only a single lantern. Li Qingshan unfolded the mental map of Qingzhou and planned his destination for the next day. He used an invisible line to connect the 27 points. 27 points, 1,000 people. Little and sat at the side. He looked at Li Qingshan thoughtfully. Li Qingshan asked, "Do you remember the number?" "How much?" Little and dipped his finger in tea and wrote on the table, 57, 26 points, 953 people. Li Qingshan revised the numbers in his mind. He did not deal with the assets left behind by Shi Jixiang. Ever since Little and gave him this clear goal, it had become his number one goal that he could not wait to complete. The faster he was, the sooner Little and could recover his physical body. However, it was not completely without gains. Sure, Jixiang had been engulfed by the flames, but he had left behind a few talismans. They were supposed to be his trump cards, but faced with the absolute difference in strength, they were not used at all. Li Qingshan raised his head and smiled. "It will be done soon. Tomorrow we will go to Julu Valley and look for those bandits. What do you think? The route I planned is not bad, right?" Little and wrote on the table again, "But if we continue like this, we will soon alarm these people, and they will hide." "That's true. Then we can only move faster and travel day and night. If they all hide, it will be troublesome." Li Qingshan was slightly stunned. He rubbed his chin in thought and found that Little Anne's words made sense. These people were not monsters in games, waiting to be cut down. After being cut down, they would respawn again. This was because these people could never be killed. Chapter 153. Little Anne was more than willing to search slowly with him. If they found one, they would kill it. If they could not, there was no need to panic. However, seeing how impatient he was, he did not want him to worry about his matters. So he came up with an idea. "Why don't we find a way to gather them together?" Li Qingshan sighed in admiration, compared to finding them one by one and seeing if he could invite them to a certain place and then kill them all in one fell swoop if he wanted to farm monsters. He obviously had to lure them over. Why hadn't he thought of such a simple principle? Momo Little N's head. "I couldn't tell, but your little head is so full of schemes." Little and could not take the compliment and lowered her head in embarrassment. With that, Li Qingshan's thoughts immediately sprang to life. Afterwards, he flipped through the mission information and finally found a name. Shun Shihua lived on an island in a large lake in the south. He called himself the Island Master of Shihua. He was a romantic and had a penchant for sex. According to investigations, he was a pervert who had committed over a dozen crimes in the past. His cultivation was also the highest out of the 27 missions that Li Qingshan had completed. He was a first-layer Qi practitioner and was extremely reputable in the underworld. He was rated as someone with a wide network of friends. To the Hawkwolf Guard, he was perfectly stuck in a situation where he could defeat all martial arts practitioners. He could be described as a master of survival. Li Qingshan muttered to himself, Qian Yannian only had a birthday, and he managed to invite so many people to celebrate. You might be a little weak, but you can't be too bad. Right now, all I care about is quantity, not quality. Of course, he probably would not be able to celebrate his birthday so coincidentally, but there had to be a reason for him to marry and have children. If he did not have a reason, then he would create one for him. Afterwards, he would invite many masters of the blacklist to attend the gathering. The corner of Li Qingshan's lips gradually curled up into a smile. Perhaps there would be even more unexpected benefits. Silver Mountain Town. The third day after Li Qingshan had left. Night 1 watch. Within the thick mist, a luxurious carriage drove over slowly. The wheels rolled over the stone path, but it made no sound at all, as if it was separated by a layer of sponge. It stopped in front of the auspicious casino silently. A handsome young man dressed in red came down from the carriage and walked into the casino with his head held high. Although Shi Jixiang was gone, only 2 of the 5 leaders under him died that night. The remaining 3 were helping him take care of the mines and other properties, so they managed to escape the disaster. At this time, they were discussing with their subordinates how to distribute the remaining fat of Shi Jixiang to Shi Jixiang's concubines. The 3 of them laughed together, and the atmosphere was quite harmonious. But when it came to the ownership of the gambling house, which was making huge profits every day, they immediately changed their attitude. The dispute was so intense that they almost took out their blades to fight each other. At this time, the red-clothed youth walked into the gambling house. His body seemed very thin, and there were no signs of him practicing martial arts or qi. However, he was very arrogant, so he naturally did not receive any kind treatment. Where did you come from, Uncle Rabbit? This is not a place you should be at. Hurry up and get out. Before the person finished speaking, his shoulder fell off his head. His face was still filled with shock. He did not know how this world had suddenly turned upside down. At this time, a cold snort came from the carriage outside the gambling house, and a skinny finger stretched out of the curtain. The red-clothed youth turned back and smiled. Thank you, lady. A Xiantian expert. The 3 leaders were shocked at the same time. Moreover, it was a Xiantian expert who was unimaginably powerful. And the real trick was probably only qi practitioners like Zhuo Zhibua, who had opened up their qi could see, to be able to directly release qi over 30 meters away to kill someone. Even a 6th layer qi practitioner would need the help of a spirit tool to do so. This was a different concept from using spells. Li Qingshan could also use a suitable spell to attack from this far away, but using qi 3 meters was the limit. Moreover, it could only be used to slap people, not behead them. And for ordinary 2nd layer qi practitioners, 1 meter was already considered not bad. After all, if the power was similar to using qi directly, then why would qi practitioners spend so much effort to create spells and then painstakingly condense their qi into spells? An old, shrill voice came from inside the carriage. You'll answer whatever he asks. If you don't know, then go investigate. If you don't get an answer, you'll all die. Everyone in the gambling house trembled. The red-clothed youth took out a portrait. That night, the person who came to the gambling house, was it him? The face on the portrait was extremely lifelike. It was Li Qingshan. After a while, the red-clothed youth came back to report. Lady, it's confirmed that the person was Li Qingshan. He left Silver Mountain Town. Where did he go? He probably went to Julu Valley. It seemed like he had completely grasped Li Qingshan's whereabouts. Then let's hurry. How impatient. This time, it was an old hand that stretched out of the curtain. Its long nails were painted bright red, making it look a little strange. A series of screams rang out in the gambling house. An ordinary long blade suddenly danced in the air, crisscrossing and drawing streaks of white light, killing everyone in the gambling house one by one. Compared to using chi to kill people directly, it was easier to use a tool. Of course, it would be even easier if the tool was a spirit tool. Everyone in the gambling house knew martial arts, and the three leaders were second-rate experts. But in the face of the all-pervasive long blade, there was no way they could resist. In a few breaths, the gambling house was littered with corpses, and the long blade finally fell to the ground with a clang. The red-clothed youth was slightly taken aback. He heard the old voice in the carriage say, "You humiliated my Jia, and you still want to live?" The red-clothed youth immediately revealed a look of incomparable happiness. He entered the carriage and threw himself into the arms of an old woman. The old woman was dressed in red, and her hair was white. Her face was haggard, and she hugged the handsome youth like a lover. They weren't just the two of them in the carriage. There were three other youths in the carriage, and they were just as young and handsome as the red-clothed youth. One of them complained, "Granny is biased. She only loves Jia, said, "We agreed to serve Granny for the rest of our lives. You're not allowed to be jealous. Lady, there's no need for you to personally investigate something like this. You can just send any disciple from the torture chamber." The incident at the Jiaping Gate Tower is likely related to this person. To be able to kill Zhao Liangqing without anyone noticing, he must be at least in the 6th layer of qi refining. If we send a normal disciple, he'll just be sending himself to his death. There's no point in staying in Clear River City all the time. Granny's title was Grandma Shiman, but her surname wasn't Shiman, but Gate. There were 4 grannies in the east, west, and west. Each one of them had opened all 8 extraordinary meridians and was a powerful cultivator in the 9th layer of qi refining. No one dared to call her by her real name, and the people outside had gradually forgotten her real name. All that remained was a title of respect, and that was Grandma Shiman. Chapter 154. Fang Ben grumbled to the young man. "Could it be that Granny has fallen for Li Qingshan because he's so strong? Granny already has us, so she can't be too unfaithful." It was completely the adoration of a lover without the slightest hint of reluctance. It was just like the men of ancient Wind City looking at Hibiscus. Hibiscus was only at the 2nd layer, but her arts of charm were already enough to drive ordinary people crazy and strike fear into qi practitioners. Just how powerful would the arts of charm of this 9th layer qi practitioner, Grandma Shiman, be? How could these mortal youths resist her? All of the qi warriors were doing their best to satisfy their needs. Grandma Shiman said in a doting manner, all right, I'll kill him as soon as I see him. As long as Granny loves us, what does it matter if there are other men? We're all good brothers." With the passionate voices, the carriage moved slowly and silently, rolling over the wet, stone road. Only at a closer glance would one discover that there was an inch of space between the carriage and the stone road the entire time, as if there was an air cushion. It was the same when the horse's hooves landed on the ground. Some runes silently flickered. The horse that was driving the carriage was originally a fine horse that was used to drive the carriage during the day. However, when it pulled the magnificent carriage, it seemed as if it wasn't affected at all. It galloped forward at an inconceivable speed. The auspicious casino was littered with corpses. Afterwards, the minor caretakers of the minor leaders would gather over and engage in a new round of debate. They would grow endlessly like weeds. Perhaps outsiders would join in, and then there would be killing and conflict. This was the so-called Jianghu. In the end, Li Qingshan still went to Giant Deer Valley, as it was unlikely for the horse bandits to receive the Island Lord of Cherishing Flowers' invitation. According to the information, the horse bandits were composed of people with the bloodline of barbarians. Every single one of them had a purple beard. And even if the Island Lord of Cherishing Flowers invited them, it was unlikely for these barbarian horse bandits to ride to the island. As a result, he wanted to deal with them along the way. The horse bandits galloped through the vast wastelands. Giant Deer Valley was only one of their habitats. When Li Qingshan arrived, he missed. He did not give up. Instead, he lay on the ground and twitched his nose to carefully identify the traces on the ground, like a sharp and vigilant beast. As his demon body gradually grew stronger, the world in his eyes also became more and more colorful, full of three-dimensional and layered feeling. This kind of tracking ability was almost instinctive. The smell and marks on the ground were still fresh. They hadn't gone far. And the marks on the ground showed that there were at least 200 horse bandits, which made Li Qingshan's eyes brighten. Then he immediately went on his way. True Qi gathered under his feet. He stepped over weeds that were as tall as a man and galloped under the amber night sky. In an hour, he had chased for 100 miles and finally found the group of horse bandits. Amidst the smoke and dust, the horse gang shouted as they charged towards the caravan. The merchants barely managed to put up a defense, but in the face of the rumbling hooves of the horses, they could not hide the fear in their eyes. Their scimitars reflected the sunlight, dazzling white. Suddenly someone asked, "What's that?" A cloud of smoke and dust came from the northwest direction and pierced into the group of horse bandits. A figure jumped high out of the smoke and landed on the horse bandit leader's carriage. Li Qingshan stood on the saddle, pressing down on the bandit leader's head with one hand and grabbing the reins with the other. He forcefully turned the horse around and brushed past the merchant group. The moment the merchant group brushed past them, the merchants all raised their heads. The expression on the young man's face in high spirits gave them the impression that he was not grabbing the bandit leader's head, but a huge piece of gold. Someone murmured, "That's a person." The horse bandits scolded and hurriedly chased. They did not care about the caravan and went to save their leader. From then on, no one ever saw the infamous giant deer-mounted bandits again. Galloping into a boundless wilderness, Li Qingshan slapped down with his right hand and slapped the head of the horse bandit leader into his stomach. The huge force passed to the horse, and it fell to the ground. The horse bandits caught up, but Li Qingshan's figure had already disappeared. They suddenly raised their heads and saw flames falling from the sky, filling their eyes. The numbers changed. 7:55. On the second day after Li Qingshan had left the Jutong Valley, the carriage arrived. It was the young man in red again, who got off the carriage to investigate. "Granny, he's not here." "That kid sure is fast." Grandma Sheeman unfurled a mental map and pointed at a point on it. "Let's go to the next place." This was the route that Li Qingshan had planned out in the beginning. She knew the mission that Li Qingshan was about to carry out like the back of her hand. They complained that the journey was just too boring. They were used to having fun in the Clear River Prefecture, so they did not like traveling such a long distance. Grandma Sheeman said dotingly, "All right, once we reach the next city, we'll rest up." It was a tiny puddle on the map, but when they saw it in person, it was a vast, misty lake. "This is it. This bastard sure knows how to enjoy himself." Li Qingshan stowed the mental map away and gazed into the distance. Through the depths of the mist, he could vaguely make out an island. The island was shaded by green willows, with red walls and green tiles vaguely visible. The lake was adjacent to the city. The scenery was pleasant, and it was extremely convenient. It was indeed a good place to live out one's days in peace. However, When he thought about how people like that actually had to live out their days in peace, Li Qingshan felt extremely displeased inside. Afterwards, he licked his lips, imagining their faces when they lost their smiles with devilish malice and delight. Using the darkness of the night, he entered the lake before making his way up from the other end of the island. Just now, he could see the luxurious manor clearly. Outside the manor, many armed guards patrolled the area. The security was tight, but to Li Qingshan, this level of security was basically non-existent. Li Qingshan leapt off the ground gently and arrived on the eaves several dozen meters away. Afterwards, he rushed towards the largest house. In the tent, breasts rippled and moans, and teasing constantly rang out. "Master, you're so powerful." Li Qingshan rubbed his nose. He seemed to always end up ruining other people's plans. It was so late at night, and all the bad guys were rolling in the sheets, while the good guys could only watch erotica. Yep, live erotica. Amidst the chaos, a light cough interrupted all the sounds. A figure leaped up from the bed and lifted the curtains. "Who is it?" Their eyes met. Both of them were rather surprised. Li Qingshan had never thought Shen Shihua would actually be an old man. Most of his hair had already turned white. Only then did he suddenly remember that it was written on the document that he had committed a crime in the past and had been shelved by the Hawkwolf Guard for many years. Even though he was a young man, he had become an old man. However, Shen Shihua saw a young man in simple clothes sitting boldly on an armchair, staring at him covetously. Although he did not give off any special aura, just the fact that he could appear in his bedroom silently was enough to shock him. "Put on your clothes. I have some things I want to talk to you about." Li Qingshan placed something on the table and stood up. Shen Shihua rushed over to the table. When he saw the item, he shuddered and paled. He picked it up carefully and felt a bone-chilling coldness. He shuddered again, and his face became even paler. It was a black wolf that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. In a small pavilion hidden by verdant willows, Li Qingshan leaned against the railing and gazed at the lake in the distance. Shen Shihua changed his clothes and hurried over, offering up the black wolf tablet with both hands courteously. "May I ask for Sir's name and why you've come to my humble abode?" Li Qingshan accepted the tablet and said, "Don't you know what you've done? You've committed a crime, Shen Shihua." He had watched quite a few detective shows in his past life, so what he learnt was how to be dignified without being angry. Shen Shihua dropped to his knees with a plop. "Sir, it was all because of a moment of foolishness when I was young. Please be magnanimous and spare me. If you have any requests, I'll do it for you." He was a formidable figure of the underworld, a first layer master of the Jianghu. Before he had even seen Li Qingshan fight, just the sight of the black wolf tablet scared him to the point of pissing his pants, begging for mercy on his knees. Shen Shihua was extremely helpless. Who would want to bow and scrape to someone several decades younger than them? When he saw the black wolf tablet, he wanted to flee, but he was reluctant to part with his family's business. And if the Hawkwolf Guard really wanted to find him, how could they not find him? Fighting was even more impossible, let alone what would happen if he lost. Even if he won out of luck, his entire family would be buried with him, whether it was angering or killing a Hawkwolf Guard. When Li Qingshan stood before him, he was no longer alone. Instead, he faced an organization of violence that the so-called people of the Jianghu feared. Of course, it was impossible for him to understand the hostile relationship between Li Qingshan and Zhuo Zhibua. To him, that was already a struggle between the upper echelons. However, Shen Shihua was still hopeful. Since Li Qingshan did not directly attack him, it meant he still had a chance. As a result, he mustered his courage and came over to listen to what Li Qingshan had to say. Sure enough, Li Qingshan said, "I have something for you to do." He sat on a stone bench in the pavilion and looked down at Shen Shihua, refusing to let him get up. Li Qingshan could treat regular people with courtesy, but he would be out of his mind if he paid any attention to courtesy when it came to someone like Shen Shihua, compared to killing and robbing. He found actions like this even more shameless. If it were not for the fact that he had a plan in mind, he wanted to kill Shen Shihua right now. Shen Shihua riled up. "Feel free to tell me what you need, Yamato." Li Qingshan took out 24 documents and tossed them before Shen Shihua. "I want you to invite all the people up here, including their subordinates and their disciples. Anyway, the more people, the better." Shen Shihua's expression changed drastically. He immediately realized what Li Qingshan was trying to do. This young Hawkwolf guard actually had such terrifying thoughts, as if he wanted to capture all the masters of the underworld within a range of several hundred kilometers in one fell swoop. Li Qingshan said, "For a birthday, for having a child, or for some other reason, for obtaining a supreme cultivation method, or a divine weapon for everyone to appraise. As for the specifics, I'll leave it up to you." Shen Shihua said, "Sir, you're trying to make me feel unjust." Li Qingshan sneered. "Do you think a rapist like you is worthy of mentioning the word unjust?" Shen Shihua's face reddened. He argued, "It's all in the past. I left behind quite a lot of wealth for those women. They might not necessarily be unhappy." Chapter 155. Li Qingshan stepped on Shen Shihua's head and sucked in a deep breath. He growled, "Of the women you mentioned, 3 have committed suicide. I don't know about the others, but I'm warning you, don't provoke me." Yes, Shen Shihua stammered. He was willing to face a second layer Qi practitioner with his strength at the first layer. Even if he could not win, he would be able to escape. However, only now did he discover he was wrong. The stomp was so fast that he could not react at all. The heavy killing intent was even more suffocating than the pressure on his head. Li Qingshan slowly removed his foot. Think about it. Shen Shihua lowered his head for a long time before raising it again. "Will you let me go like this?" Li Qingshan said, "I'm not here to negotiate with you. Do you accept or not? You can try your luck." Under Li Qingshan's disdainful gaze, Shen Shihua said, "I accept." Li Qingshan smiled and personally helped him up. You should have said that from the start. However, he had never planned on letting Shen Shihua go in the first place. Since he planned on using him, he could not display a will of, "I will definitely kill you." That would not be chivalrous, but foolish. Shen Shihua's expression eased slightly. Li Qingshan saw that his facial features were regular and his appearance was dignified. He must have been a handsome man when he was young. You can be considered to be from a noble clan, so why would you do something like this? Shen Shihua said, "I was young and ignorant. Sir, when would you like to summon those people?" Li Qingshan said, "The sooner the better." Shen Shihua said, "I don't have much of a relationship with a few of them, and a few of them have long-cherished wishes. Even if I invite them, they might not come." Li Qingshan said, "That'll depend on your abilities, Island Lord of Cherishing Flowers. Also, it doesn't have to be them. If you have any evil or heartless friends, feel free to invite them all. The more, the better. If there are too few people and the gathering is too quiet, I will inevitably be a little unhappy." Shen Shihua's heart trembled. Although the person in front of him was young, he was definitely not a soft-hearted person. Otherwise, he would not have thought of such a terrifying thing. Right now, he could only brace himself and continue. He invited Li Qingshan to stay in the lakeside house for the time being and instructed the servants to serve him carefully and not to disturb him at will. The next day, an invitation was delivered to Li Qingshan. After Li Qingshan nodded, it was divided into dozens of copies and distributed to the experts on the blacklist. News of the Jianghu, the ambitious and ruthless figure of the underworld, the island lord of cherishing flowers, has obtained a bottle of pills that can allow acquired cultivators to reach the innate realm. He wishes to sell it to a group of masters. Please come to the island of cherishing flowers on the 8th day of the 8th month, the beginning of autumn, and bid for it together. It's called the Pill-Seizing Assembly. Li Qingshan sighed inside. This was basically the same as what had happened when he had obtained the spiritual ginseng in the past. Shun Shihua was already an innate master, so he obviously had no use for the pills. However, to the other first-rate masters, this was basically an irresistible temptation. Even if they were doubtful, they still had to try it. After throwing out the bait, all they had to do was wait for the fish to take the bait. From that day onwards, Shun Shihua greeted him every day. He was extremely considerate. Li Qingshan meditated and cultivated every day, never leaving his room. The people on the island only knew that he was an esteemed guest of the island lord, so they dared not disturb him. Coupled with the fact that he would mutter to himself from time to time, it seemed extremely eerie, which made people even more afraid to approach him. After Shun Shihua left, Little and walked out from behind the curtains. His bony fingers caressed the beautiful silk, imagining himself wearing it. He raised his head, and his eyes met Li Qingshan's. They were momentarily speechless. There was only the sound of rain outside the window, but there was a quiet joy flowing in their hearts. Then Little and happily played with the toys, the windmill, the spinning top, the bamboo dragonfly. This left Li Qingshan rather stunned. Then he reflected on whether he did not care enough for Little, and if he thought about it more carefully, ever since he was with Little, and it seemed like the thing he did the most was kill people. Killing people was not a bad thing. In this cruel world, it was probably a necessary skill. There was a need for adult beasts to teach their young how to hunt. That was how Li Qingshan comforted himself, so that his conscience would not suffer too much. Then he sat there and propped his head up with his hand. He began to think deeply about the problem of little Anne's education. In the future, he would bring him out to sightsee and experience nature more often. Then he could not help but smile. He felt warm. Although this world was very cruel, he was not alone. Even a lion would use its full strength to capture a rabbit. On the day before the 8th of the 8th month, Li Qingshan finished all of his qi gathering pills, adjusting his body to its peak condition. Tomorrow, when those bastards gathered together, what would he say as a prelude? For the sake of the beauty in my heart, I ask all of you ugly ones to die. He seemed more and more like a great villain. Do I look good? Grandma Sheeman asked. Yes, you look good. The man with the 9 dragons tattooed on his body lowered his head and said in fear. His companion's blood had just spread to the soles of his feet. Just because he saw this ugly old woman, he smiled and then split into pieces. Then why don't you look at me? Grandma Sheeman said darkly. The man slowly raised his head and then was stunned. He had never seen such a beautiful woman in his life. Cold eyes, noble, it made his heart beat faster, and he could not control himself. Suddenly, a man's portrait appeared in front of him. That sweet voice, like the singing of an oriole, asked, "Have you seen this person before?" He shook his head blankly, blaming himself for not being able to help her. Then die. His shriveled lips spat out cruel words. The man immediately smashed the top of his skull with a backhand. Before he died, he looked at Grandma Sheeman in a daze, a smile still on his face. Originally, He thought he would only be a pirate for the rest of his life, but he never thought he would be able to die for the person he loved. He felt happy from the bottom of his heart. My life was worth it. Leaving the water snake gang, Grandma Sheeman said furiously, "Just where did that brat run off to?" In the past few days, she had searched according to the best route that Li Qingshan should have taken, but there were no traces of Li Qingshan at all. She had completely lost track of Li Qingshan. In the end, she could not hold it in anymore and went on a killing spree. Behind her, the corpses of the good men of the water snake were strewn across the ground. They could no longer cook dumplings in the river anymore. They all smiled happily, dying for love. The red-clothed young man found a vermilion invitation card from the gang leader's bosom and handed it to Grandma Sheeman. Grandma Sheeman looked at the invitation card and thought for a while. She smiled eerily. "I see. This brat does have some brains. I've underestimated him. Come, let's go to Lakeside City." The 8th of the 8th month, Lakeside City, Island of Cherishing Flowers. Li Qingshan tidied himself up and took out the chipped, wind-entwining blade, hanging it on his waist. Looking out from the window, he saw many small boats sailing over in the wind and rain. They stopped at the dock, and many people emerged. Most of them carried weapons, and their faces were ferocious. He could tell with a single glance that they were not good people. They matched the information on Li Qingshan's documents. These unorthodox masters were worried that this was a trap, so they were on guard against one another. They all gathered their best subordinates, just in case. However, they had no idea that there were people counting like sheep in the shade of the willow trees. 281, 342, 557. By nightfall, the number had already surpassed Li Qingshan's expectations. The island was decorated with lanterns and streamers, and a great banquet was held in the hall. Under Shen Shihua's hosting, the unorthodox masters all gathered together. It really was a grand banquet. Shen Shihua spoke cheerfully, showing no flaws at all. Chapter 156. Shen Shihua smiled. "Everyone, please don't be impatient. Please drink a few cups of wine. I'll go get the pills." Retreating into the darkness outside the hall, his smile immediately disappeared. It was obvious that he had a lot on his mind. "Sir, Island Master invites you to the back hall." A servant respectfully said, "Outside Li Qingshan's door." Li Qingshan followed the servant down the long corridor. 2 swift and fierce men jumped out of the dark thicket and blocked their way. "Who are you?" The servant hurriedly said, "2 heroes. Are you our Island Master's guests?" The 2 looked Li Qingshan up and down. "How come I've never seen you before?" Li Qingshan said, "It's not like they're all people you can see." "What did you say?" The 2 were furious and wanted to draw their swords. With 2 muffled thuds, the 2 fell back into the dark thicket, turning into 2 corpses. "Go see the King of Hell," Li Qingshan said to the servant. "Continue walking." The servant trembled and hurriedly complied. In the study, Shen Shihua rubbed his hands uneasily. Suddenly seeing Li Qingshan come, he quickly invited him to a seat and poured him tea. Li Qingshan said, "Island Master Shen, what do you want to say? Hurry up and say it. I can't wait any longer." With his hearing, he could clearly hear the clamor in front of him. His blood was faintly boiling. Shen Shihua lifted his lapel and knelt in front of Li Qingshan. "I've already done, as Sir instructed. I beg Sir to let this lowly one go." Over the past few days, Li Qingshan had never been willing to promise him that he would spare his life, which made him unable to eat or sleep well. Li Qingshan said, "How do you know I'm going to kill you?" "Sir, are you really going to kill me?" Shen Shihua raised his head in shock and stared closely at Li Qingshan. His gaze faintly showed the determination of a cornered dog jumping over a wall. Li Qingshan said, "It's not that I don't want to spare you. It's that what you've done cannot be forgiven." Shen Shihua said in a hoarse voice, "But this lowly one has already turned over a new leaf." Li Qingshan said, "Turn over a new leaf? 6 months ago. Where are you? Do you think the Hawkwolf Guard can't find out?" The Hawkwolf Guard did not have many corps members, but as an organization of Qi practitioners that did not care about money, they had countless informants and spies in the various major cities. Although no one had asked about the mission to kill Shen Shihua for all these years, the information had never stopped changing. This was to ensure that any Hawkwolf Guard who thought of him would know where he was and what he was doing on any given day. Shen Shihua suddenly recalled that half a year ago he drank some wine and saw a beauty passing by in Riverside City. He brought her to the island and forced himself on her, reminiscing the romantic days of his youth. He argued, "But I've already taken her as my concubine." "Then how many more concubines do you want to use this method? Why don't you tell us about it?" Li Qingshan's tone was very calm the entire time, but his anger was like scorching lava flowing beneath a frozen mountain, ready to erupt at any time. Shen Shihua's expression changed again and again. He pressed down, and a tile sank in. A series of springs rang out from the ground, and a huge metal cage sprang out, trapping Li Qingshan inside. The place where Shen Shihua had invited Li Qingshan to sit was actually a trap, and it was extremely well designed. From the moment Shen Shihua pressed down on the tile to when the mechanism was activated, only the blink of an eye had passed. Shen Shihua barked, "Li Qingshan, you've gone too far. Since you won't give me a way out, then I'll die with you." The bars of the cage were as thick as an adult's arm. They were forged into a single piece, and there were many inscriptions carved into them. When Li Qingshan's fingers touched the bars, he immediately felt as if he had been pricked by a needle. At the top of the cage, there was a strange beast that looked like a tiger, but wasn't. Shen Shihua said, "This was made by a Mahist mechanism master. It's called the Bian Demon Trapping Gate. Even a powerful demonic beast can't easily escape. Just give up. I'll ask you again. Are you willing to give me a way out? If you agree, I'll let you go, and I'll even help you kill people." "If I say I'll let you go, you'll believe me?" Shen Shihua was also struggling. "I'm willing to gamble. I believe that you're a man." "By N." Li Qingshan was silent, and he slowly shook his head. Shen Shihua shrieked, "Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. You're currently in my hands. As long as you nod, we can all sit down and make friends. Although your cultivation is high, there might be a time when you need me." Li Qingshan laughed loudly, and his voice shook the entire room. It was as if a gust of wind had swept through the room. The calligraphy and paintings were swept to the ground, and the porcelain shattered. Shen Shihua covered his ears and circulated all the internal energy in his body to resist. He was shocked. Was he really only at the second layer of Qi refining? The underworld experts in the front hall only stared at the wine cups on their tables. They couldn't stop trembling. The entire hall seemed to be swaying slightly, alarmed by the noise. What happened? Who's laughing? What a powerful internal energy. It came from behind. Did an island master Shen go to the back to retrieve the pill? Could it be that he's here to steal the pill? As soon as he said this, no one could sit still. "Let's go and take a look. Let's see who's blind enough to dare steal food from the tiger's mouth." Li Qingshan stopped laughing and said to Shen Shihua, "You're just a pig and a dog. Do you think you're worthy of making friends with me?" Even bad people had dignity. Shen Shihua said, "You're going too far." A group of underworld experts rushed over and asked in shock, "Island Master Shen, what happened? Who is this person?" Those who could enter the study were all first-rate masters. Those with weaker martial arts, including their subordinates, could only watch from outside. You forced me to do this. Shen Shihua's face twisted. He said to everyone, "Everyone calm down. I want to talk about something that concerns everyone's lives." Everyone fell silent. Shen Shihua said, "This person was sent by the Hawkwolf Guard to kill us." Everyone paled in fright when they heard the 3 words Hawkwolf Guard. Although they regarded themselves as masters of the blacklist and acted as if even the Hawkwolf Guard could do nothing to their subordinates, they actually feared the terrifying organization that controlled the blacklist the most. In other words, there aren't any pills. Damn, Shen Shihua, you've actually worked with the Hawkwolf Guard to screw us over. Everyone began to consider retreating. They looked at Li Qingshan like he was a man-eating tiger. The young man sat boldly on the armchair, his hair draped down, obscuring his face. Even though he was trapped in a cage, he gave off a terrifying sense of dignity. Shen Shihua tossed down a stack of papers. "Take a look. These are the official documents of the Hawkwolf Guard. He's come this time to kill us. Which one of you doesn't know what happened to the auspicious casino in Silver Mountain Town? It was all because of this kid. Do you want to be next?" They all picked up the papers on the ground and found their names. Afterwards, they trembled in fright. The honor of being a master of the blacklist had now become a life-threatening talisman. "Island Master Shen, what do you want us to do?" "In for a penny, in for a pound. Kill a Hawkwolf Guard. You're mad." "If we don't kill him, he'll kill us." Just as everyone engaged in an intense discussion, Li Qingshan coughed gently and attracted everyone's attention. He said, "Those who should be here are all here." Tian Zhonghao, a short, coarse, middle-aged man, shuddered. "What do you want? In the past, you learnt martial arts under the tutelage of the Fist Master Wang of Bamboo Willow Village. It's all because he found you to be devious and refused to pass on all his martial arts to you. So you poisoned him, stole his secret manual, and became a bandit. Over all these years, you've blocked roads, killed people for their goods, and feasted on the hearts and livers of living people. Isn't that right?" Under everyone's gazes, and with Li Qingshan in the cage, Tian Zhonghao refused to lose face. He said rudely, "So what?" Li Qingshan ignored him. He continued, "Zhao Ruyong, you like to kidnap the children of wealthy families the most, and then force them to pay ransom. If they dare to report you to the authorities or refuse to pay the ransom, you'll cut off their ears or fingers and send them back. Am I right?" Zhao Ruyong's eyes and ears were sharp. His expression was cold as he sneered. Those little bastards were born luckier than others. Of course, they deserve to suffer. Li Qingshan did not speak further with him. He continued to call out names one by one until the end. Those whose names have not been called out have joined the bandits, done evil deeds, committed countless crimes, or conspired against the law. According to the laws of Great Xia, their crimes cannot be pardoned and will be executed on the spot. And you, Shen Shihua, pay the price for what you've done." Everyone laughed. "You? Is he crazy? Yes, we have to kill him." The laughter gradually faded. Li Qingshan stood up from the armchair. He grabbed the railing of the Demon trapping lock with both hands and pulled forcefully. His blood and qi surged, his muscles bulged, and his clothes were torn. The railing flowed with a blue light that resembled electricity, all concentrated on Li Qingshan's hands. He felt as if hundreds of needles were pricking him. Of course, he did not care about such a small matter. However, under his enormous strength, the railing did not move at all. Shen Shihua was shocked, but he relaxed. "It's useless. You can't break my Demon trapping lock." A mocking smile appeared on the blacklist expert's face. He looked at Li Qingshan as if he was looking at a stupid beast. Li Qingshan's long hair was scattered, covering his face. The corner of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. This is... Shen Shihua was the first to sense the change in Li Qingshan's aura. This kind of change was something that only he, a qi practitioner, could sense. However, immediately after, everyone saw the change in Li Qingshan's body. Li Qingshan's originally tall and sturdy figure seemed to have grown a bit taller. His jet-black hair flashed with a hint of scarlet under the light. His bronze skin seemed to have darkened. His arms, in particular, had actually become as black as iron. Creak. The metal cage let out a painful squeak. The blue electricity became more and more intense, but it could not stop the arm-thick railing from being pulled apart. Shen Shihua took a step back. This is impossible. You are. Then he shouted, "Everyone attack together and kill him." Chapter 157. Ships of all sizes were docked at the docks. A light drizzle continued to fall, creating thousands of ripples on the surface of the lake. A thin layer of fog appeared on the surface of the lake. The light from the glass cover of the boat illuminated a faint yellow circle. Everything appeared to be extremely calm. Many of the experts had been left behind to guard the ships in case someone cut off their escape route. They were all discussing in their cabins. Just now, a loud laugh came from the island. With a loud boom, a two-masted ship seemed to have been hit by something. It shook and then began to sink at an extremely fast speed. The experts who had stayed behind all heard the commotion and walked up to the deck. They saw that the sinking ship belonged to the Green Wolves gang. Other than the Green Wolves gang members who were flustered and exasperated, everyone else stood on the deck and laughed, watching the show. But then there was another loud boom. Another ship began to sink, and then a third. Everyone felt that something was wrong. They shouted, "What's going on?" "Not good. Water ghosts are sinking the ships. Those who can swim, go down and take a look." The water ghosts they were talking about were obviously not real ghosts, but people who had dived into the water. Immediately, more than a dozen vigorous figures jumped into the water. Their eyes tried to adapt to the darkness at the bottom of the water, and then they revealed astonished expressions. They saw that in the pitch-black and ice-cold water, there were actually two large flames burning, red with a hint of white. No one had ever seen such bright flames that were full of life. The flames quickly grew larger, and they could finally see where the two balls of fire came from. They couldn't help but stare in shock. It was a giant skull taller than a human. It looked like the skull of a giant, but at this moment, it seemed to have come alive from the abyss of hell. Its eye sockets were bursting with vitality as it looked at them with a burning gaze. Then it opened its mouth and swallowed them. The mouth was also burning with flames, as if the gates of hell had been opened. Little and stood in the pitch-black water, his hands clasped together, manipulating the skull prayer beads to swallow these people one by one. Then it rammed into the remaining ships. The giant skull rammed into the bottom of the ship, immediately creating a large hole. With a series of dull thuds, the ships sank one by one. On the pier, everyone's faces were filled with unconcealable fear. The boat had been destroyed, and the people who had gone into the water never came back up. They didn't know what was in the water, but they were trapped here. Bang, 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 bang. With a series of soft sounds, the people standing on the shore fell to the ground like puppets with their strings cut. Everyone cried out in alarm, "Enemy attack!" Where? Come out, come out. No one saw the white shadow that cut through the rainy night. The skull prayer beads had already returned to their round and smooth shape. It was shuttling through the rain as if a sixth-layer chi practitioner was using a weapon. It was not something that these Jianghu people could detect. More people fell to the ground. The more cowardly waved their weapons and looked around, but all they saw was the dark night. Some of the calmer ones tried to check the cause of death, but soon found that there was a finger-sized hole from the chest to the back, but there was no blood flowing out. Just as Zhang Xian was deep in thought, someone exclaimed, "It seems like there's fire." The others also noticed that there seemed to be a little flame in the small hole. The wound continued to expand, and the small hole became a big hole. However, not a single drop of blood flowed out. The flame silently devoured the flesh and blood of the dead. Every single person who had the right to be invited to the island of cherishing flowers was a ruthless desperado. However, people constantly died beside them. They could not see the enemy, only the strange sight. They were all frightened out of their wits as they retreated step by step. The flames devoured all the flesh and blood, and in the blink of an eye, only a skeleton was left. The color of the skeleton became brighter and brighter, and it was full of vitality. Then, as if unsatisfied, it exploded with a bang, emitting thousands of sparks that scattered on the bodies of these underworld experts. The flames passed through his clothes and did not leave a single burn mark. However, as soon as it came into contact with a bit of fresh blood and flesh, it was like fire meeting oil. It quickly spread and burned into a raging inferno. Cries of anguish rang out on the pier as dozens of people were set ablaze. In the blink of an eye, there was no more sound, only dozens of skeletons were left. Little and emerged from the lake water and calculated silently. 697. The remaining skeletons were covered in a layer of pale flames. The skeletons melted like snow very quickly, turning into several dozen droplets of bone fluid that merged with his body. Little and was just about to make his way to the manor and assist Li Qingshan when he suddenly sensed something and turned around. His eyes that burned with flames pierced through the thin mist and crossed an extremely great distance. He saw a huge black ship sailing over slowly. After a moment of consideration, Little and still chose to make his way to the manor. Ha! Li Qingshan sucked in a breath and bellowed. Pure, true qi, mixed with demon qi, turned into the tiger demon's fierce roar with a violent gust of wind. It landed on the experts of the blacklist, and they immediately flew backwards as they vomited blood. Their faces and chests were reduced to a bloody mess. It seemed like they were done for. Although this was only the tiger demon's fierce roar that had been weakened countless times over, it was still not something that mere masters of the Jianghu could withstand. In a single clash, several first-rate masters had been slain by a single bellow from Li Qingshan. These first-rate masters who were used to using their powerful martial arts to rampage around and do whatever they wanted witnessed the difference in strength between them and true Hawkwolf guards. With the sound of twisting metal, Li Qingshan ripped open a huge hole in the iron bars. The inscriptions on the demon trapping cage dimmed, and all of its spiritual qi vanished. Li Qingshan walked out from within. He was like a vicious tiger that had emerged from a cage, giving off a threatening aura. The masters of the underworld all took a step back as they stared at Li Qingshan in shock and fear. Li Qingshan's body and hair returned to normal. Under the circumstances where he could not ensure that everyone was present, he would not reveal his demon form before so many people. The first person he needed to eliminate right now was obviously Shen Shihua, who could sense demon qi. Oh no, the ships have all been destroyed. A lackey suddenly rushed in from outside and called out, "What? Who did it?" Tian Zhonghao grabbed the lackey by the shoulder and called out, I don't know." The masters of the blacklist all looked at Li Qingshan, although they had heard what Shen Shihua had said. Only now did they clearly realize that this young Hawkwolf guard actually wanted to make them all stay here and kill them all. Li Qingshan smiled, and began moving as well. Afterwards, his eyes narrowed, and he looked past everyone, landing on Shen Shihua, who had hidden himself in the crowd in an attempt to flee. He called out, "Where do you think you're going?" Shen Shihua shuddered inside and turned around in shock. Li Qingshan's figure had already arrived with his voice, rushing towards him with a fierce gust of wind. A few unorthodox masters were unable to react in time. They stood in front of Li Qingshan, but like a stampeding herd of elephants had collided with them. They were directly knocked several meters away. All of their bones shattered, and they died without a single sound. With a flash, the talisman was burnt to ash. A golden figure rose up from Shen Shihua's body. His reactions were not slow either. In the face of imminent danger, he used a strength talisman of the Guardian Kings before forcefully turning around and swinging his two golden fists at Li Qingshan's chest from above. Li Qingshan did not seem to hear him at all. His right hand extended like a tiger's claw, reaching towards Shen Shihua viciously. Die! The tiger demon digs out the heart. His 5 fingers were like 5 steel rods, wrapped in true qi, forcefully stabbing into the golden light. True qi and the light collided violently. An ear-piercing sound rang out. Shen Shihua was utterly shocked. He had never thought a strength talisman of the Guardian Kings would be torn apart by a person's bare hands. However, he knew that his life was in danger, so he furiously gathered all of his true qi into his 2 fists and threw them at Li Qingshan's chest. Li Qingshan took the 2 fists head-on, but his figure only swayed slightly. His right hand shattered the golden light and seized the opportunity to grab Shen Shihua's chest. He pulled out a bloody heart. The scene suddenly quieted down. Shen Shihua, who had the highest level of martial arts, had not even been able to exchange a single blow with Li Qingshan. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to the many experts of the underworld. They could no longer care about anything else. They all took out their life-saving talismans and bit the tip of their tongues to spit out fresh blood. The talismans were activated and shattered one by one, giving off a bright light. However, all of them ran away at the same time. They did not even care about their subordinates. No one came up to fight Li Qingshan. When a fierce tiger descended the mountain, all the birds and beasts scattered. Talismans, I have one too. Li Qingshan casually took out a cool breeze talisman from his 100 treasures pouch and activated it with true qi. A whirlwind wrapped around his legs. His body seemed to become much lighter. He took a step forward, as if he was stepping on a cushion of air. He soared into the air. In the air, he pulled out the chipped, wind-entwining blade and swung it horizontally. The expert with the best qinggong had already jumped over the wall. He was cut in half by the wind blade. Blood and internal organs splattered all over the ground. After Li Qingshan used the cool breeze talisman, his already swift figure became even more ghostly. A string of figures flashed out and blood splattered everywhere. A tiger entering a flock of sheep was not enough to describe its might. This was no longer a battle, but a one-sided massacre. Under the absolute difference, in strength, techniques were meaningless. He only needed to wave the wind-entwining blade lightly, and heads would fall to the ground. With every step he took, he killed from the study to the courtyard, and then to the main hall. It was as if a Jura had appeared in the world. The experts of the underworld fled in all directions like a swarm of bees. They hated their parents for not being born with 2 more legs. In their hearts, they cursed Shen Shihua's parents 1,000,000 times. One of them turned around and saw Li Qingshan's figure flashing towards him. He knelt on the ground and shouted, "I'm a spy from the Yamen." In the blink of an eye, he saw Li Qingshan standing in front of him. The long, jagged saber stopped in front of him. In the blink of an eye, Li Qingshan was somewhere else. His whole body was exhausted, and he collapsed to the ground, rolling and crawling to hide in a corner. Many people followed suit and knelt on the ground, shouting, "I'm also a spy." For a moment, there were spies everywhere as far as the eye could see. Li Qingshan did not have accurate information about these minions, so he was hesitating. On the distant surface of the lake, dozens of sparks lit up in the thin mist. A mournful cry sounded in the air as it rapidly approached. Boom, 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 boom. Within the deafening booms, the island of cherishing flowers immediately became a sea of fire. Chapter 158. Quite a few people stood on the deck of the ship. There were both monks and Taoists among them. They gazed at the island of cherishing flowers in the distance with worried expressions. Part 2. If the people of the Jianghu were present, they would definitely cry out in surprise, as basically all the decent masters of the orthodox path within several hundred kilometers of Jiaping had gathered here. There was black and white in the world. The so-called orthodox path was not necessarily pure, flawless, and chivalrous, but they were a group of people who obeyed the law and maintained order. There were quite a lot of people who treated benevolence and etiquette as their family rules. You could call it hypocritical, but most people in the world still liked to stand in the sunlight. This was the principle of humanity. The hypocrite Yu Buchuan had done many good deeds like purging evil and helping the weak at the end of the day, while the true villain Tian Boguang had truly harmed countless ordinary people. However, the conflict between the orthodox path and the orthodox path had never stopped for a single day. To put it simply, from the very beginning, if a martial artist wanted to live a luxurious life of luxury, the simplest and most direct way was to become a thief, steal money, and steal women. There were also many people who were unwilling to do this, but they also wanted to live a luxurious life of extravagance. They wanted to become young heroes, so killing a nest of mountain bandits was obviously a good choice. They would have money and women, and they would gain something else as well, fame. If a young hero managed to kill countless mountain bandits without dying, he would become a great hero, while a petty thief who managed to steal countless money and women without dying, he would become a great thief. The two of them obviously had a lot of enemies, but that did not matter. They had quite a lot of friends too. With this, they formed two groups of people who constantly fought with each other. To put it in simpler terms, there were countless grievances and grievances between generations. The grievances could go back several lifetimes. Every single one of the unorthodox masters who came to the island of cherishing flowers had enemies on the ship. When the news of the pill's seizing assembly spread, not only were the unorthodox masters restless, but the people on the ship became restless as well. When they thought about how their enemies would break through to the innate realm and appear before them, kill them, and then steal their money and women, they could not just stand by and watch. And if there were such great pills, who would want them? Thus, they secretly planned this operation. However, this group of orthodox experts was vaguely led by a little girl, and they respectfully surrounded her. The little girl was only about 13 or 14 years old. She stood at the bow of the ship, dressed in plain clothes that fluttered in the wind. Her face was calm and mature, but because of her baby face and her young age, she looked a little funny. An old monk with white hair and brows bent down and said, "Miss Hua, do you think so?" The little girl stared at the island of cherishing flowers in the mist like a general. She did not respond at all. The old monk raised his head and looked at the others helplessly. Then they all looked at the young lady in purple beside the little girl. They were all renowned figures of the Jianghu, yet none of them could do anything to this little girl, as not only was she a second layer chi practitioner at such a young age, but she also came from a renowned clan. When she went out for training, she became acquainted with great hero Yu's daughter, Yu Zijin, who was also the girl in violet, which was why they agreed to assist her. As soon as they arrived by the lake, she took out a small boat from her 100 treasures pouch and tossed it into the water. It turned into a huge ship, which left everyone amazed. With her assistance, the operation this time was basically in the bag. The evil followers would definitely die a horrible death. Yu Zijin said, "Chenglu, say something." Hua Chenglu raised her hand with composure, telling Yu Zijin not to say anything more. Afterwards, she waved the small flag in her hand and ordered, "Turn the ship around and prepare to fire." The ship slowly turned around, facing the island of cherishing flowers on the port side. Afterwards, several dozen small wooden doors opened, and several dozen pitch-black cannons extended out. However, because the ship was a mechanical puppet, it was not controlled by the crew at all. Instead, it was completely controlled by the flag in her hand. As a result, the mighty order did not seem as mighty anymore. Instead, it was rather comical. Everyone revealed strange expressions. Yu Zijin whispered, "Chenglu, are the fire dragon cannons really that powerful?" Due to being doubted, Hua Chenglu's composed face became furious. She pointed at the island of cherishing flowers. "Watch me flatten this place." Afterwards, she ordered loudly, "Fire!" The pitch-black cannons sprayed with several dozen sparks, like the roars of fire dragons. They planted several dozen mushroom clouds on the island of cherishing flowers in the distance, destroying most of the structures on the island in an instant. The island of cherishing flowers, the magnificent hall collapsed, and the small, exquisite building burst into flames. The island of cherishing flowers that Shun Shihua had managed for so many years was reduced to ashes with his death. The orthodox masters on the deck were all shocked. They believed that even if they were on the island, they would not be able to escape alive. Compared to true innate abilities, acquired cultivators were just too weak. Yu Zijin murmured, "So powerful." A sliver of complacency appeared in Hua Chenglu's eyes, but she did not show it on her face. Yu Zijin asked in worry, "Chenglu, are there any innocent people on the island?" Hua Chenglu lectured earnestly, "Zijin, those who want to achieve great things shouldn't be bothered by trifles. You're still too young." The other Orthodox masters all felt that this little girl truly was the descendant of a renowned clan. They did not take Yu Zijin's words seriously. As long as they could blast these bastards to death, who cared if they were innocent or not? Standing on the boat from afar and watching their enemies turn to ash, there was nothing more delightful than that. "Great hero," you smiled warmly and generously. "Zijin, even if there are innocent people, they've sacrificed themselves for the sake of the martial arts society. The people of the underworld are all cruel and cunning. If we can't be more decisive and smarter than them, how are we supposed to defeat them? You need to learn more from Miss Hua." Yu Zijin curled her lip. She dared not argue back. She only felt like her father had changed. In the past, great hero, you would have scolded her sternly and scolded her if she dared to speak like this in front of the other members of the martial arts society in the past. If she dared to disobey him again, he would directly draw his sword. Although he had never actually cut her down, he was nowhere near as gentle as he was right now. Because of his daughter's acquaintance with Hua Chenglu, great hero, you received the respect of the other members of the martial arts society. He basically laughed even in his dreams. Not only was Yu Zijin's future bright, but even he, her father, could benefit from it. Obviously, he was kind to his daughter. In particular, before Hua Chenglu, he was basically the epitome of a benevolent father. Under the flattery of the Orthodox masters, Hua Chenglu smiled like she did not care. She waved the flag in her hand and launched another volley of cannons. The entire island of Cherishing Flowers was enveloped in flames and smoke. The shockwave struck a huge shield and dispersed as a whirlwind. Li Qingshan lowered the spiritual artifact shield and looked at the surface of the lake in surprise. What was going on? He was not surprised that there were firearms in this world. He was just curious as to who would, but in like they wanted to flatten the island of Cherishing Flowers. However, there was no point in thinking too much about it. It had instead helped him out. Cannon fire at this level posed no threat to him at all. With the table-sized shield, he walked through the cannon fire like it was flat ground. He was unscathed. However, to the unorthodox masters, it was basically the end of the world. Not a single supermaster who shouted, "You have cannons, I have divine arts," appeared. They were all blasted to pieces as they wailed for their parents, saving Li Qingshan the trouble of finding them one by one. Little and passed through the cannon fire easily and arrived before Li Qingshan. Within the endless booms, Li Qingshan nodded. His voice was swallowed up by the booms. His lips moved as if he was saying, "Let's begin." Both of their eyes seemed to be shining brightly. Little and brought his palms together and held the skull prayer beads in his palms. Afterwards, he lowered his head and chanted. The flames flowed like water, silently spreading through the heavy smoke. They crept from the collapsed walls to the burning buildings, devouring the corpses one by one. 427, 311, 225, 131, he silently calculated in his heart. Suddenly, Little and raised his head. His eyes shone with joy. All the flames began to flow back to his side. They coiled around him like snakes and turned into a large cocoon, wrapping him in layers. Gradually, Little and could no longer be seen. All that was left was a large crimson cocoon made of flames floating in the air. Li Qingshan stared at the flame cocoon. He did not look away for a moment. He clenched his fists tightly and suddenly became nervous. The bombardment continued. At this moment, a cannonball pierced through the thick smoke and landed on Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's left hand shot out like lightning and grabbed the cannonball. Boom! The cannonball exploded in his palm, charring his hand. He continued to stare at the cocoon as if he did not feel it. He did not even turn his head. Time passed by slowly. Before he knew it, the cannonball had already stopped firing. Li Qingshan just sat down in the rubble and leaned on his hand. At that moment, apart from Little and there was nothing in the world, no one that was worth his attention. Even Xian Yue and Gu Yenying were no exceptions. His ambition of venturing beyond the 9 heavens was temporarily set aside as well. On the deck of the ship, Hua Qinglu smiled. "It's done." She waved her flag and ordered, "Let's go and take a look." "What's that?" Someone suddenly called out, pointing behind the ship. Everyone turned their heads and became extremely stunned. A carriage tore through the mist, rapidly crossing the water and arriving before the ship in the blink of an eye. It stopped slowly. Grandma Shimin lifted the curtain and frowned. This was the Hua family's wave cutter. She had seen it in the Clear River Prefecture before, so she could not be wrong. The mechanical ship had been forged by a few great masters of Moism. The fire dragon cannons on it were powerful, and it carried several hundred mechanical puppets. Every single one of them possessed the strength of a low-level Qi practitioner, so it was extremely expensive to build. Her sect was powerful, but she could not ignore the Hua family's influence in the Clear River Prefecture. As a result, she called out, "May I ask which fellow from the Hua family is here?" Hua Qinglu leapt onto the railing and said, "Hua Qinglu is here." Grandma Shimin said, "So it's you, brat. You stole the family's ship and ran off to play?" You better be careful of getting spanked for mixing around with these riffraff. The Orthodox masters all had no objections when they were called riffraff, regardless of gender. They all stared at Grandma Sheeman in a daze and sighed in admiration. There's actually such a beauty in the world. Even her wrinkles seem to contain an extremely enchanting radiance. Chapter 159. Scarlet Hua. Chenglu did not fall for that. She refused to back down. So it's you, you old ghost. This ship was mine, in the first place. You're the one who stole the carriage and ran off to play. Grandma Sheeman said in displeasure. You're so young, yet you're already so sharp-tongued. I'll definitely have a good talk with your father when I see him. I have matters to attend to right now, so I don't have time for a little girl like you. Hua Chenglu immediately retorted. Then when I see Big Brother Chingzan, I'll have a good talk with him too. You old woman, you're bullying me just because I'm young. Grandma Sheeman snorted coldly. The carriage sped up towards the island of cherishing flowers, leaving behind 2 tracks on the surface of the lake. In the carriage, the young man in red said, unhappily, Grandma, why don't you teach this girl a lesson? Grandma Sheeman said, neither her father nor brother are kind people. They're difficult to deal with, or I would have taken her life a long time ago. Humph, there'll be a time for her to cry in the future. If you hadn't insisted on eating the sugar-roasted chestnuts, delaying us, we would have arrived a long time ago and dealt with Li Qingshan. We wouldn't have to endure this girl's anger either. If regular second-layer Qi practitioners were bold enough to be so rude to Grandma Sheeman, she would have killed them on the spot a long time ago. However, since they were from the Hua family, she could not help but show some respect. Moreover, Hua Sengzan's identity as the Scarlet Wolf commander possessed quite the deterrence in the Clear River Prefecture. The young man in red curled his lip. It's not like I'm the only one who wants to eat it. Not to mention, it's not too late right now. Li Qingshan must still be on the island. On the deck, Hua Chenglu gazed at the departing carriage and snorted coldly. However, her soft, nasal voice was nowhere near as forceful as Grandma Sheeman's snort. It was more like a pout. With a wave of the flag, the wave breaker cut through the waves and pursued the carriage, heading towards the island of cherishing flowers. In the mist, the outline of the island of cherishing flowers gradually became clear. The flames from the cocoon grew weaker and weaker, like the setting sun. Only a scarlet sphere remained, and it grew smaller and smaller. Rain fell from the sky and landed on the cocoon, causing white mist to rise. The cocoon was filled with red light. Little En's body was curled up. Just now, he was in his mother's womb. The flame was no longer a flame, but a viscous liquid, like the amniotic fluid in the womb. Moreover, it contained a tremendous amount of life energy. Bit by bit, it completely soaked him. He had already comprehended a little of the essence of the path of white bone and great beauty. At this moment, he wanted to turn the dead back to life and enter a state that was neither dead nor alive, turning white bone into great beauty. His bony fingers formed a Buddhist seal, and a mysterious secret was triggered. Flesh grew from the bones, and the flesh was reconstructed. Li Qingshan held his breath. With a crack appeared on the cocoon and spread in all directions. Li Qingshan's heart was in his throat. A tender little hand stretched out from the cocoon. It was white with a tinge of red, as if it was carved from blood jade. One could almost see the veins and arteries within. Li Qingshan shot to his feet, but he did not dare to disturb it. Gritting his teeth, he suddenly felt his eyes turn moist and red. He had personally witnessed little En's soul turn into white bone, and then to the rebirth of flesh and blood. His heart was enveloped by great joy. He believed that no matter how cruel and bloody this path was, what he possessed was not just slaughter and hatred. With a series of cracking sounds, the cocoon shattered. Flames rose from within, and a petite figure stood in the flames, reborn from the ashes. A strange fragrance of sandalwood wafted into the air, immediately driving away the pungent smell of smoke and soothing one's heart. Li Qingshan took a step forward. Little, and you finally… The flames dispersed, revealing a little girl, naked, with her hands forming a Buddhist seal, standing in the lotus petal-like flames. Her skin was like carved jade, and there was a red mole on her forehead. Her eyes were like two black pearls. From top to bottom, there was not a trace of impurities or dirt, as pure as a red lotus. She looked at her hands in confusion, as if she could not believe that she had really recovered her flesh and blood. She raised her head and looked at Li Qingshan. It seemed that she was not used to using her face. There was no expression on her face, but her black, pearl-like eyes suddenly burst out with incomparable joy. She stretched out her arms to him. Li Qingshan was stunned for a moment. Then he quickly walked forward and hugged her tightly in his arms, tears overflowing from the corners of his eyes. Just like the father who had been waiting outside the delivery room for a long time. Although he only found out that the child was not a boy, but a girl, to him, this little accident was not a big deal. It was not worth paying too much attention to. The joy in his heart would not change in the slightest. Li Qingshan could not stop saying, "This is great." After a long time, Li Qingshan suddenly felt that his tongue was clumsy and did not know what to say. He wiped away the tears at the corners of his eyes and said, "Put on your clothes first." Little and nodded obediently in his arms. Li Qingshan let go of her and rummaged through his 100 treasures pouch. He said in distress, "But there are only male clothes." "Sai, why didn't you say so earlier?" Little and shook her head, as if saying that she had also forgotten. After so many years, whether it was a soul or a white bone, gender was not important. Li Qingshan was helpless. When the witch abducted her, she must have disguised herself as a boy to deceive others. It had always been his first impression. Li Qingshan examined Little and again, once again confirming that there was no mistake. However, he found that there were red marks on her body. Her skin was as delicate as a newborn's, like fine silk. Even she would be scratched, not to mention his rough embrace. He asked with concern, "Did I hurt you?" Little and shook her head. Compared to the pain of the blood flames burning her body and the blue flames burning her bones, this kind of pain was simply the most blissful. Li Qingshan carefully helped her change her clothes, as if he was holding a fragile, rare treasure. Little and opened her eyes wide. She wanted to say that she was not that weak, but she also enjoyed the care she was receiving at this moment. Li Qingshan could not help but pinch her cheek. It felt very good to the touch. It was so delicate that it seemed as if it would turn into water and slide down his fingertips, touching the red mole on her forehead. He vaguely remembered that this was the mark left behind by the ginseng liquid. Could it also appear on the body? Little and was like a doll, obediently not moving at all. She let him pinch her, feeling the warmth from his fingertips. Her heart skipped a beat. Li Qingshan rubbed her smooth head and said with a smile, "It's a pity that you don't have hair, but it will grow back soon." Little and blinked her eyes and suddenly took a step back. She clenched her fists and held her breath, gathering all her strength. Then her black hair grew out crazily. Not long after, it fell from her shoulders to her waist. Li Qingshan hurriedly said, "It's done, it's done." Only then did Little and stop exerting strength. Her long hair had already grown to her knees. It was moist and lush like water plants with natural curls. It was so dark that it did not reflect any luster. It was very special. He saw that she was wearing a gorgeous lake silk gown, like an extremely handsome young master. Li Qingshan looked at her with indescribable joy. He was very happy and could not help but laugh. He felt that the road ahead was bright, and there was nothing he could not do. At this moment, the neighing of a horse came from the lake. Li Qingshan turned his head and saw a horse carriage passing through the thick fog, quickly approaching, followed by a large ship. Li Qingshan frowned. If his guess was correct, the cannons just now were fired from this large ship. And on the horse carriage there seemed to be a strong aura, and it carried hostility. This was not the ability of a Qi practitioner, but purely the instinct of a demon. The horse carriage sped up the shore and quietly stopped in front of Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan saw an old woman wearing a large red robe getting off the carriage. Her whole body was emitting a threatening aura. Even Zhuo Zhibua had not felt such a strong aura. Among the people he had met, the only one who was close to it was Hua Sengzan, but he was much weaker than Hua Sengzan. The person who came was a ninth-layer Qi practitioner expert. The West Gate granny disembarked from the carriage, but her gaze slid past Li Qingshan and landed on Xiao and beside him. Afterwards, she was unable to shift her gaze away anymore. Her face was filled with shock as she murmured, radiant like the flowers of spring, flowing with light, skin of ice and bones of jade, and makeup of jade. How can a single person possess so many aspects of beauty? Hold on, is this the legendary heavenly fragrance and nation beauty? This is impossible. Grandma Shimen was experienced and knowledgeable. Of course, she would not be shocked by a child's appearance. The words she said were not just simple words of praise. These were the standards and names used in the sect to judge a person's physiognomy. There was the flower moon physiognomy, the peach blossom physiognomy, the fragrant jade physiognomy, and so on. Some were high, some were low, and they were carefully divided into 9 grades. If one had any of the physiognomy, they would be able to cultivate the sect's charm arts with half the effort. If one had a higher physiognomy, they could easily achieve extraordinary results. The current sect master had the peach blossom physiognomy. He had been valued by the previous sect master and taken in as a disciple, which was why he had his current achievements. As for Grandma Shimen, she had the red flying physiognomy of the dancing red emerald physiognomy. She had also stood out and become one of the 4 great grannies of the sect. As for Jiaping City's top courtesan, Hibiscus, although her appearance was ordinary, she had been taken in as a disciple because of her graceful appearance. Among the various physiognomy, there was one physiognomy that only existed in legends. It was the physiognomy of national beauty and heavenly fragrance. The physiognomy of national beauty and heavenly fragrance was a combination of various physiognomy. It was the head of fragrance and the crown of all physiognomy. As soon as Grandma Shimen saw little, and she gave out the name of the physiognomy, and then finally came to this result that even she herself did not dare to believe. Rumor had it that once this physiognomy appeared, it was a sign that the world would be in chaos. Although it might not be accurate, it was said that this physiognomy's charm was a femme fatale, capable of causing the downfall of countries and cities. Grandma Shimen instantly cast Li Qingshan aside, completely forgetting about the disappearance of her outstanding disciples, Zhao Liangqing and Hibiscus. She stared fixedly at Little and walked over step by step. She was almost even more excited than Li Qingshan. Too beautiful, too good. If she was taken in as a disciple and brought back to the sect, Li Qingshan blocked Grandma Shimen's way with a swoosh, interrupting her reverie. He asked, "Who are you? What do you want?" Grandma Shimen raised her head in displeasure and looked at Li Qingshan, who was much taller than her. The arrogant expression on her face made it seem as if she was looking down on him. "Oh, you're Li Qingshan? Who are you to her?" P.S. Little and has appeared out of nowhere. Everyone, give her a warm round of applause and welcome. I don't need to say more about asking for votes, right? You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.